All right, with any luck, you can actually hear me now. Uh, I hate when this happens in the event that you can hear me, which you should be able to at this stage. So I do need to rely on chat yet again, but we'll see how it goes. Well, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So what is going on? Hopefully people are actually watching this. I'm not even so sure. It's funny. Okay. Yeah, so this is a new microphone setup. That was what I was testing. I thought I had tested everything on this new microphone soundboard, and I don't know. So I've been trying to improve my production qualities. I've moved into a new room, and since I moved into this house, I have never been happy with the audio quality. And this is something that I've been trying to fix. And so I'm experimenting with using my wife's preamp, basically, that she uses for her recordings. And this works. I'm going to get my own, I guess. But it was really funny is I tested this like 5 times before I went live. And then suddenly when I hit record, just didn't work. So I don't know. We'll see how this works. It's nothing worse than starting a live stream, doing the intro, and then having the thing just fail and not have any audio, because I can't disconnect this thing and reconnect it to the audio interface when I'm rolling and everyone is just looking at this stream when it comes down to actually determining what's going on or who's actually watching what. You know, like I have 77 concurrent viewers right now. That's really small. Usually it's twice that much at the beginning. I haven't even really started the dialogue yet. It's funny. I was the last time I did one of these streams, which was about 4 weeks ago, I was really angry, and now I'm not. But I'm really angry now at my audio interface. Hopefully people can tell me before I just start the lecture or the actual podcast. This is all going to get cut out, by the way. It's been cut out of the podcast. I'm kind of curious what the chat thinks of this. Is this microphone sound better than usual or louder than usual? And I also have another system where the I can actually post super chats up. I installed this and plug into OBS, so hopefully that will help with super chats. I don't know. I hate using StreamYard. I prefer, I just don't like the service very much. And I mean, I probably should commit to that bit, but it's not really been worth it. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to do Restream, and then I'm going to do, it sounds a bit hot. Slight clipping. Okay, well, that's easy enough to fix. I can just take this down a little bit. Hello, testing. Okay, this should be perfect right now. I don't think anything will clip at this level. I can also manually decrease this here, but this is all gonna get okay. I'm gonna turn the gain down. Okay, how about this? This looks like it's perfect. Okay, I think this gain's pretty good. I hear Dave's natural vocal fry. So I'm sorry, new microphone setup. You're gonna have to tolerate some eccentricities in the actual audio setup. Hopefully, if I make this audio setup permanent, I'll be able to finally, get this solidified once and for all. The last time I did Ask Me Anything, the audio quality was terrible. I could re-listening to it. I couldn't believe. I'm amazed that people gave me any super chats whatsoever because it was just so absolutely terrible. There was one super chat before. I'll try to find it and read it out loud, but I'm not going to be able to display it or anything. So that's that. I think we can move on, and just do a little bit of a cut here and actually have the podcast. Well, good evening and welcome to Fiddler's Green podcast number 75. Together once more. Audio problems aside, I am here after, it's not really a long hiatus. I do one of these streams every 2 weeks, but the last time we did one of these streams, it was an Ask Me Anything, which meant that there was basically no lecture, no theme that I was tracing. It was leading up to the Old Glory Club conference, which I'll talk about later. And it was more or less just me taking on news events, not trying to build a larger theme about discourse. And and everything. As people know, I'm experimenting with a new setup, a new audio setup, a new chat setup. And to be quite honest, I've really been struggling with my relationship with YouTube. I feel like I have a very good relationship with Substack. That is a very easy way for me to interact with people. I understand what the Substack audience wants. I understand what pieces I write on Substack are really hits. There's a correspondence between something that I write on Substack that I think is really good and how much popularity it gets. On YouTube, it's just a complete mystery. I just make content and then it randomly does well or it randomly does poorly. Although I suspect that this particular podcast will do quite poorly because of the fact that the previous stream failed. And as is everything on YouTube is essentially completely front-loaded to current bias. It's not frequency biased. It is present bias. The algorithm always prioritizes the first immediate 24 hours after you release a video, and that I don't produce content that is super topical. I produce content that is designed to be somewhat permanent. I mean, obviously I talk about current events, but I take time, I write out a lecture, I have a theme that I'm tracing. It's something that I intend to be kind of a podcast that can last. And because I'm kind of sick of news slop. I'm saying this right before I cover a news slop, but I am genuinely sick of news slop. I'm sick of drama. I was at the conference. I ran into Newsfest. I was at the OGC conference. I ran into Newsfest. We were complaining about the problems with streaming and the perils of being a streamer. And Newsfest was lamenting the fact that he was kind of stuck in the news slop cycle. And I really sympathize. I really do. I mean, I like to use current events to make my point. But I can't imagine. Newsfest is a great streamer. His history channel is really good, and I highly recommend his work. But I'll say this: I don't envy him his job because his content interacts with drama streaming and news slop streaming, and that's just an atrocious racket to be in. It's in some sense necessary. People talk about Andrew Wilson. And Andrew Wilson is somebody who I don't particularly like in terms of the content he produces. I don't have anything against him personally. And I don't really have anything against him ideologically either. He's never said anything that I've really disagreed with. But he occupies a type of content that I would never want to emulate in a million years. Like the whole debate bro thing. For me, the debate bro thing is just not a very productive use of time. And this is the ultimate kind of irony to this whole endeavor, is that the kind of stuff that I think is worthwhile and good to produce is not the kind of stuff that the general audience on YouTube thinks is worthwhile. The general audience on YouTube and on Twitch streaming thinks that debate broing is awesome. They think drama is the best shit ever. They don't care about anything that didn't happen immediately in the last 3 days. If I bring up something that happened 2 weeks ago, they don't really care, and they don't want to watch anything after it's been processed. So they wouldn't care if the podcast came out in 2 weeks in audio or in 2 days in audio, because everything is recency biased in YouTube or in Twitch or in any of these streaming communities. And, so I'm kind of the odd person out. So every one of us, and I think that, this product that I produce here, it tends to be popular. Very ironically, some people call me your influencer's favorite influencer. The people who watch my show are themselves influencers to a large degree. So and I guess that's how it should be. Because I'm somebody that's sort of mulling over things at a second order level. I'm taking these takes after people cover them in sort of the studio news business, like the Lotus Eaters, or in sort of the live stream business, like Newsfest. I take them after that, and I try to reprocess them into a general narrative about what's going on with the vibe and the direction we're going in. And I don't have time to test my microphone even, which is why you're getting kind of raw cuts from me when I go live right after work. and that's the case. But that's the show that I produce, and I got to find a way to make it work better with the YouTube algorithm. I think that the solution will be eventually to just take this and produce clips out of it. Go to one of the they do this automatically now with LLMs, but either download the video and cut it up and make clips of it, which is time consuming and I don't really want to do it, or develop clips from one of these new LLM things. And maybe that LLM way of generating clips would not be too bad. It would be the first time I use generative AI without reservation. I used it for coding and I don't really like it. I've used it for I definitely hate it for anything having to do with word processing, but maybe it'll be a usage to generate clips, because I hear that clips are the place where it's at these days in terms of doing well on YouTube. And we'll see. What YouTube has become is kind of deeply alienating to my kind of content creation. But we will proceed forward for the actual show now that I've done my disclaimer. So speaking of this, speaking of news events, what's been going on in the news today that I really want to react to? Well, what's been going on in the news today are just a series of kind of horrific tragedies. And, I haven't done this in a few weeks. I've done the Ask Me Anything where this has gone on. But most of the big horrific news stories have all been in the old world, or the United Kingdom more specifically. Of course, the war in Iran, hypothetically, it trailed off. It ended. Does the war in Iran ever really end? I don't know. But it seems like we might be coming to the end of the relationship between the neocons and the Trump administration. And maybe with that, the MAGA civil war will end. And, this is something that's sort of an open question for Americans. Really, in the last 2 weeks, in the last 4 weeks, nothing really that interesting has happened in America. Really, almost all of the interesting news events have been in the old world and in the UK in particular. And this is kind of where we're finding ourselves here. I said on the OGC conference when I did my talk, which hopefully will become a Substack essay in short order, that the principal thing that we all felt in 2026 is much less some kind of message. 2025 was you can just do things. 2021 was we can't keep living like this. In 2026, what we have is less some kind of message or imperative or realization, like the vibe shift or the death of discourse. What we have in 2026 is just a series of really harrowing images. Sometimes the images come out several months after the event occurs, but they seem to perfectly illustrate everything that's wrong with our relationship with the modern world. Just very, very concisely. Very, very concisely. And they're not necessarily even the worst tragedy that's ever occurred. They're just something that if you see it, then at some level you have to acknowledge what time it is. That's what is it? The Zoomers' favorite meme is always the white rabbit with the pocket watch and so on and so forth. The white rabbit with the pocket watch. What time is it? The first example of one of these things that came up recently was the death of Henry Nowak. And I went over this a little bit with my colleagues at the Old Glory Club conference. It wasn't really about the Henry Nowak killing, but it was interesting because the story basically had two lives. If people remember, you heard about this guy who got stabbed to death, and then the officers came and they handcuffed him. And, this was I think we heard about this first. The incident happened in December. And I think we started hearing about this incident sometime in March or April when the trial was ongoing, or when the trial started. The first initial disclosure of this event happened. The police had to release their findings. And it became one of these things where it sounded, whenever you hear one of these reports or instances where you have a sensationalist headline and, it didn't really happened the way that the sensationalist news blotter headline portrays it to have happened. I guess I'm not thinking of any one of them that's come to mind recently, because they've all in the last year been as horrific as they've sounded initially on paper. But at least in the pre-2026 world, what would happen is there would be an outrageous event, and then you'd look into it, and then, it would still be outrageous, but it would be somewhat embellished by the original thing that came along the news blotter headline. And so the assumption was that, okay, the story of the guy who got stabbed by the Sikh and then got handcuffed by the police officers when they came across a situation. This obviously had some kind of, there was some kind of mitigation. They had gotten into a fight previously. There was blood on both sides. They didn't know who was responsible. The cops had plausible deniability, blah, 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 blah. But, this is sort of what you rationally do whenever you hear of a story that comes from a partisan source. You immediately think that you're in some kind of Rashomon situation and that the video is going to vindicate a more nuanced reading of what's going on. This was not the case for the Henry Nowak stabbing. In fact, as the details kind of became more clear and the event play-by-play became more clear, the case became worse and worse and worse and worse, and illustrated sort of everything wrong with the modern United Kingdom quality. The United Kingdom, the state of, let's just use Thomas Carlyle's word, the state of Britain question. Everything about the Henry Nowak instance communicated the fundamental problem with the state of Britain. It was not just the story of the Sikh who stabbed the British man and then the cops came and handcuffed him before he died. The story became kind of a multi-layer example of all the things that were set up to benefit minorities and newcomers in Britain and to penalize the white native denizens of Britain. Now, Henry Nowak was indeed not a heritage Briton. He was Polish. He was probably closer to me in ethnicity than he was the actual Anglo-Saxons who lived there. But as we all know, grafting other Europeans into European societies is a much easier task accomplished, and he was more or less a native son by the time this incident happened. And certainly the cops perceived him as being a native son of Albion, so to speak. Okay, so what makes this problem so bad? What makes it worse than just the injustice of handcuffing the wrong guy? Well, the problem is that every single incident that, when the details came out, if you did a play-by-play, every one of the modern British problems had to be in effect in order for Henry Nowak to die. So he's obviously I hate to call him a young scholar because it has implications, but I believe he's a student of some variety. He has a few drinks, not actually enough to be too inebriated to drive even in the United Kingdom, but he's obviously having a good night, and he shouts some kind of somewhat provocative reference to like gang culture at this random Sikh guy, this random South Asian guy, and this gets absolutely blown out of proportion by this Sikh guy who absolutely loses it. Now, as you know, the problem here is that Sikhs are allowed to carry ceremonial knives on their person. I won't say that's fine. I mean, look, I come from America. I think you should have ceremonial bazookas would probably be fine for our culture. But in the United Kingdom, broadly bladed weapons are illegalized. So the assumption in any interaction is that no one is going to be armed. But in addition to having this small little ceremonial knife that apparently all Sikhs are expected to have and carry around, the Sikh in question, and I can't remember his name. Actually, as a matter of fact, I should probably Google it just so I have the narration down on this. I would Henry Nowak stabber. I want to get it wrong. Digwa. I'm gonna get the guy's actual name here, and it is. Vikram Digwa. Vikram Digwa. I didn't know that Vikram was a Sikh name, but there you go. Anyway, in addition to having the small little ceremonial knife, Vikram Digwa is also carrying a larger ceremonial knife in this Sikh style. He seizes Henry's cell phone, which is bad enough, and they get into a scuffle. And then what's so funny is that that's why you originally thought. Originally you thought that these two guys, they got into a scuffle. The guy drew his knife and stabbed him, as people do, right? Fights naturally escalate. There is a certain sanity to just getting into a fist fight and having it naturally evolve into a knife fight. But as soon as the fight breaks out and Digwa takes Nowak's phone, Nowak runs, and then Digwa draws his sword and runs after him and is able to stab him while fleeing from the actual confrontation to begin with, which is straight up. That is just far and away the worst thing that you can imagine. At that point, when your opponent is fleeing from you, to then pursue them with a deadly weapon. So Nowak apparently hops a fence, is bleeding out, crashes on the other side, where Digwa then runs around and corners him in possession of his cell phone. So at this point, he has both his and Nowak's cell phone in his possession. He has the weapon against unarmed foe. He has both cell phones, which allows him, therefore, to totally control the flow of information regarding this story, which is critical. This is the other dimension of the problem. This is how the story of Nowak and Digwa becomes kind of indicative of the state of Britain question. Digwa has all the weapons and he has all the telecommunications capacity. And this is where it really comes down, because what is the first thing that Digwa does? He does not call the police. Now, he could have called the police and gave them the report and put his spin on it. Now, that would have been one thing. And that would have indicated a certain kind of power. You get into a fight with a Sikh, you lose because he is armed and you're not, and he gets to report you to the police because he has unfettered access to the information world and you do not. You do not. You are censored, essentially. You cannot report your side of the story to the authorities. He gets to report his side to the authorities. Immediately, that would be representative of two big things that the British state has done to English people generally. It's disarmed them and it's prevented them from using the capacities of the internet to tell their story to the world, which is two things that it's done. There's been the online safety bill, the first one at least, that essentially allows for unbridled censorship in the United Kingdom. And secondly, there is the fact that British people are disarmed, up to and including knives, largely because Africans use them to stab people. And of all the people who are given exemptions to the knife ban, which is a ridiculous thing to begin with, the only ones who have the only peoples who have an exemption are, for some bizarre reason, perhaps not bizarre, but kind of phony reason, to be quite honest, very few of these South Asians are actually religious in a way that we would recognize it. I would bet that Digwa did not attend monthly or weekly or daily religious services, as you might imagine somebody who constantly carried around a huge image of his own supposed religiosity. The native English are silenced and no one else is. They get to tell their story and no one else does. And they get to wield weapons and no one else does. So they win all fights and they get to be the first to report it to the police when the fight goes wrong. But he doesn't report it to the police. Digwa does not report it to the police. What does Digwa do? In essence, what does he do? In fact, I should say, with his total control over the telecommunications, in this instance, he immediately phones his family. He immediately phones his family so that his brother and his mother and his father show up. And in the process, he has his mother obscure the murder weapon, take it away and try to dispose of it in their phone, which comes up later in Discovery. Only afterwards, when the neighbors call the police, when they have total control over the situation, now there are 3 Sikhs sitting around Nowak as he is in the process of bleeding out. Only then does the call go to, I don't want to say Scotland Yard, that sounds like it's a 1920s Agatha Christie I guess it's the London Police Force, right? Scotland Yard is just like the murder division. Is that still in existence? I feel like it feels like such an anachronism calling it Scotland Yard. But only then, after the Sikh family has total control of the situation, has disposed of the murder weapon, they know that Nowak has been stabbed. Only then does the call go out to the authorities, and only after they had been alerted by another call because of the noise complaints in that area. So they are able to get out in front of that call. The first one coming from neighbors was totally disregarded. They arrive on the scene only to assess the situation. And of course, what do the Digwas report? The Digwas report that Henry Nowak attacked them. The exact opposite of what was the case. They misrepresented the exact interaction. They hid the murder weapon to make it impossible to see that he was stabbed. They lied and said that he wasn't stabbed at all, even though it was very, 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 very apparent that Nowak had been stabbed. You could see blood on his face. And one of the two police officers who approaches him before they say, Nowak is conscious at this point. He says, "I've been stabbed. I can't breathe. I need medical attention." And the officers, everyone said this already, but you know what they said. "I don't think you have, mate. You haven't been stabbed." And then one of the one woman partners like, shouldn't we check for due diligence? Shouldn't we check for due diligence to make sure he has been stabbed? "Oh, we'll get this taken out right away." And of course, what do they do? What did the Digwas do when the authorities come? He attacked me. He attacked me. Is he stabbed? No, he isn't. In fact, he knocked my turban off. And of course, this is obviously a manufactured injury. So immediately, and you can see from the body cam footage in the video, what do you say? It's the classic Middle Eastern, South Asian thing. Right in the eye and bold-faced lie. It's not even like manipulating the truth. It's not like we had a scuffle and he got stabbed accidentally. It is total inversion of the truth while making direct eye contact. No fear of consequences, no fear of morality. And this is, so the lying to the authority, that's the third component. You've got the restriction of information, the restriction of defense weaponry only to minorities. The minorities get to tell their story, the third. The direct, bold-faced lying that minority communities, specifically South Asian ones, or Middle Eastern ones, or Muslim ones, are very, very want to do, or able to do. Something that would have been totally unheard of and considered absolutely deplorable if it had occurred in a Christian society. They just do naturally. And yet the other thing they do naturally is when there is an emergency situation, they immediately collaborate to cover up the culpability of their own people and misrepresent the situation to the authorities. Digwa's mother and probably father and probably brother absolutely knew that Nowak had been stabbed, and they collaborated as accessories to the murder. And the cherry on top of all of these things, of all of these state of the United Kingdom type questions, is the fact that when Henry Nowak is apprehended by police, they immediately handcuff him. Even though he's showing obvious signs of illness and being stabbed, he's bleeding, obviously. He's in terrible condition. He is no threat to the other people there. And this is where you get the famous picture. And you can just tell that the reason why this arrest was made in this way was because the police didn't want trouble. They knew that if they arrested or questioned the narrative of the Sikh community, it would immediately trigger a political response from the Sikh community. There would be questions over whether they were racially profiling them because they're known to carry knives around. You can't accuse a Sikh person of stabbing somebody. That's like accusing a Muslim of being a terrorist. That's like accusing a black person of being a gangbanger. That's like racial profiling, isn't it? So it's just safer to arrest the white guy. And you know what? Maybe he's the victim. Who knows? We'll figure that out later. It's best just to handcuff him now because the body cam footage is running. And if we arrest the brown people, there'll be immediate consequences from it. Direct result of leftist pressure coming from Well, I mean, 2 decades of these kind of Black Lives Matter type incidences. They didn't used to call it Black Lives Matter, but they that became the rallying cry from this. It should have been called Believe All Minorities. Believe all minorities, believe all minorities, even though every single piece of evidence in front of your face right now shows that they're lying to you and that this kid is telling the truth, that he's been stabbed and he needs immediate medical attention. Instead, what happens is you end up killing the kid. And that's the famous scene of them putting them in handcuffs while he's bleeding out. Rivers of blood. Rivers of blood. And they're putting this kid, and his hands are pale. Now, it's a question whether the hands are pale because it's a cold night and the glare on the camera makes them look particularly white, or whether he's literally in a process of exsanguination, which he was. Could you tell that his hands were more pale than the other Caucasians' hands in that situation? That's a tough call. But in the moment and in lieu of all the other information, it should have been something that it would raise their concerns a little bit. And it also, in my mind, gives the perfect caption of this photo. The perfect caption of this photo is the whip hand. The whip hand. There is that famous speech, the Rivers of Blood speech. The Rivers of Blood speech given by Enoch Powell, one of the last great British politicians before essentially the parliament became devoured by its own bureaucracy. And towards the end of his career, he gave a very famous speech about immigration. I'm sure everyone knows this. It was called the Rivers of Blood speech. And what it was essentially a result of him going to London and asking his constituencies what they felt of the mass migration that was going on. And surprise, surprise, everybody who had come in contact with this mass migration had a very, very negative opinion of it. And he relates from it a few observations. And he says, he isn't, this is the thing, this is the big mistake that people always make. He actually did not observe any of this himself. All he observed were what his constituents said. And one of them said that they thought that in due time, when these immigrants take over, there will just be rivers of blood going down the street. Rivers of blood. And then another constituent said, I fear that when my children have their children, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man. I think both of those things are pretty prophetic, because this image of Nowak being handcuffed as he's bleeding out on the pavement has one word indelibly linked to it: the whip hand over the white man. The whip hand over the white man. Every single thing that Nowak experienced from the beginning of his interaction to the end was the British state wielding the whip hand over the white man. Now, is it a brown hand wielding it? Is it a black hand wielding it? Very questionable. What is wielding it actually is an international cabal of people who are a professional managerial class, kind of a deracinated bunch. And while they have certain ethnic persuasions disproportionately, one of them is certainly not black. But in every incident when the white man had a conflict with the Sikh, the British state intervened to make sure that the Sikh would be able to murder his victim. And the same thing is true in America with the Austin Metcalf ruling. This is, again, I don't want to dwell on this because I think the United Kingdom is more, there's sort of more of a pertinent moment going on right now. Austin Metcalf, I guess, is a little bit different because justice was kind of served. I mean, was it 35 years for first-degree murder? The more interesting thing about Austin Metcalf, and I guess they're not really very related in that regard, other than the fact that a knife was involved. For Americans, I guess there's some intersection here. There's sort of two lessons that you learn from Nowak. First one is one I mentioned, and that is the fact that the whip hand is being wielded against the white man, or the indigenous Briton, or the honorarily indigenous Briton on the part in the instance of Nowak. The second lesson is that these newcomers view themselves fundamentally differently than you do. They fundamentally view themselves differently than you do. They view themselves as a collective. You view yourself as an individual. And that was where the similarity lay with Austin Metcalf. The big revelation in Austin Metcalf is not that the American legal system worked in a certain way. I think that the result of that trial was more or less what you could optimally expect from the American legal system, if it's not being explicitly interfered with by some kind of activist campaign, as it was with Derek Chauvin, who obviously I think did not kill George Floyd. But in the case of Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf, the message, the takeaway, the learning is the black community does not regard this murder the same way you do. It is an obvious incident where the black kid just murdered the white one in cold blood. I don't know if it was premeditated. I don't exactly know the standards of premeditation, but it was absolutely an intent to kill and a threat to kill that it was issued before that. But all the way through the trial, and all the while when you're reading the aftermath, all you have is black professionals even making excuses for Carmelo Anthony, saying that if you touch me, then I'll kill you, and the guy touches you, then that is a direct provocation that justifies murder on the part of the original party who was touched, aggrieved by touch, and licenses murder in that instance. And you even have the black Twitter or black Substack launch into their own kind of narrative scolding. This is a pattern they get from their experience with the education systems. My favorite article was one by this black activist woman from Howard University. Dear Mr. Metcalf, Austin Metcalf's dad, your son's dead because you didn't teach him that black people have boundaries. Black people are people. They have boundaries too. That's why touching someone should license murder. And every single thing about this reaction, it's spoken in the mode of HR. It's spoken in the mode of Robin DiAngelo. Everything is framed in the language of personal boundaries and privileges and grievances and unaccounted for burdens and white this and white that. White used as this pejorative label that pre-signals everything as being fundamentally illegitimate before a conversation's even started. And you can just, this was really the lesson with the Austin Metcalf Carmelo Anthony thing. You can narrate any interaction this way. You can narrate any interaction this way. Oh, so your son was stabbed to death and then the cops handcuffed him. Well, he just didn't check his privilege. He didn't realize that Sikh kids had personal space. He wasn't educated properly, and I'm sorry that they had to stab his white body and handcuff his white hands and imprison his white body, just like all those brown and black bodies were. I mean, it has this hysterical, haranguing tone to it that we know all too well for 3 decades of listening to this. And it's totally permeated our legal system. It's totally permeated every level of the legal system. And you can see it. You can see people reacting to it and kind of getting tired of it. The fatigue is real. But I think it's more interesting in the United Kingdom, or I guess we're kind of straddling the line here with the United Kingdom designation when we talk about Northern Ireland. I believe Northern Ireland is still the UK. I can't remember. That used to be a contentious. Northern Ireland is the UK. Used to be a contentious statement, but it is more or less the same media environment, so we can deal with it in one breath. A lot of incidences happened the week that immediately followed the Nowak trial. In particular, there was a attempted beheading on the part of one Sudanese man against a native man, or an indigenous an indigenous Northern Irish man in Belfast. And this precipitated a huge set of protests. Give it to the Scots Irish, give it to the Ulster people, give it to even the native Catholics living in Northern Ireland. Man, are they a fighty people. They are way more fighty than the English, and they are way more fighty than their southern brethren in the Catholic Republic. But they are fighty, and they immediately started off confrontations with the police, burning down migrant hotels. This was a big backlash. And it was so odd because I feel like I see stabbings like that all the time, and the victim didn't even die. So it was a minor incident. Yet for some reason, it triggered this enormous reaction on the part of the Northern Irish. And I think that this is just a further iteration of this fatigue that we're saying with these results, this diversification, this invasion, this replacement. People know how this works. People understand now that the system is designed to suppress objections to this. No one wanted these levels of mass migration. These levels of mass migration are not in service with some kind of acute humanitarian crisis. These migrants are 99% economic migrants in any reasonable definition. There couldn't even possibly be legitimate war refugees in going to England because none of England's neighbors are at war. The definition of a war refugee is that you go out of the country that is currently a war zone and then you get to a new country. And as soon as that country resettles you, you are no longer a war refugee. It's not like you leave a country that it's at war and then you get to go to any country of your choice. That's not a war refugee. I know this. My father was a war refugee. He didn't get to pick what country he got to move to after they got kicked out of Yugoslavia. After they were ethnically cleansed out of Yugoslavia. That's not how it worked. That's not how it's ever worked. Yet, for some reason, I guess this was the final straw. And it is this also comes on the heels of a rape gang inquiry that was undertaken by the Restore people. I believe it was undertaken by Rupert Lowe. It's Rupert Lowe, right? And Restore who decided to commission a report on the rape gangs that have been going on in the United Kingdom now for 3 decades. Pardon me. And what's interesting to me is not that these incidents happened. I know that crime is up. I know that these populations are more murderous than the native populations of these countries. That is not surprising at all. That's not surprising in the slightest. What is surprising, I think, to me, what's kind of surprising and what's interesting to me is how the system is reacting to it. And the system is reacting to this in a very tone-deaf way, in a way that reveals what these governments have actually become, and in a very gendered way as well. It's reacting in a very gendered way. Immediately after the stabbing in Belfast, what happens is there is a backlash. And obviously, there's the riot backlash. But then in reaction to the backlash, they Northern Ireland immediately falls back into the mode of managerial diversicrat control. Suddenly, all of these bureaucratic girl bosses are out in front of the cameras saying, it's a terrible tragedy that he had to get stabbed. But the real tragedy was that the video went to the public. That's what's causing it. What caused these riots is not the stabbing or even the people who are rioting. What caused these riots is Elon Musk allowing people free access to the information. Girl boss after girl boss after girl boss wheels out of the Northern Ireland government to give me one variation of that message or the other. the Belfast mayor also comes out. There are counter protests after the riot. The counter protests are, we need more diversity in Ireland. An opinion that must be polling probably below 20% in Northern Ireland at this stage, I would imagine. We need more diversity. We're in desperate need of more diversity in Ireland. Even though the diversity obviously increases crime, even though the diversity obviously increases housing prices, even though the diversity drives all the maleficent trends inside the United Kingdom, including most prominently, in my mind at least, the decreasing level of trust that you see throughout the United Kingdom and throughout Ireland now even. And the people promoting this, they're all boomers. They're all professional progressive activists. Their job, for the most part, is to sit around and be progressive activists for the system. That's their job in one way, shape, or form. And the thing that really gets me is it's all kind of, there's just this type you notice everywhere. Here's, I have a picture here. The Belfast mayor, Lord Mayor, what's her face? I can't even remember her name. Donnelly. This woman is 29 years old. She's 29 years old, according to Wikipedia. Maybe 30. Maybe it's a little bit off. She's 30 years old, and she's the mayor of Belfast, one of the largest cities in Ireland, and certainly the city that has had the most contentious history in the entire, at least most contentious modern history in the entirety of the British Isles. And you've got this woman who's in charge of this very, very sensitive polity, and she has dyed red hair. And you know by looking at her exactly who she is. You know who she is. You know how she got there. The rape gang inquiry report is issued just yesterday or the day before it. I can't quite remember when. Now, I've got some problems with this report. The report lists that first of all, it's harrowing if you read it. It is real data. They've gathered all of these inquiries, but they also rushed it into production. And the problem with data is that it's highly sensitive, and it's very, very easy to get things wrong when you're dealing with a large amount of data in a system. I've worked with data my entire life in many ways. I'm something of a data scientist myself. I have a PhD in this, Richard Hanania, much to the chagrin of the elite human capitalists who think that I'm just a pleb. I am something of a data scientist myself. I know how this works, right? So you read this, the actual testimonies, the factual testimonies by the girls, harrowing, absolutely insane. Torture, abuse, rape, sodomy, again and again and again, continuously. And it's obviously racially motivated. That is the beginning and end of it. These men are doing it to these girls because they are European, because they are white, and because their culture brings them up to see all white people as whores and slaves and prostitutes that can be abused by their group at will, because that is what they're good for. And this is a long tradition in Islam. Islam has always had a problem with kidnapping women from other groups, but the favorite victim group, the favorite group to abscond women from has always been European Gentiles, indigenous European women. These were the most prized victims for Muslim harems. That is where the name white slavery gets its name. That's why white slavery means forced trafficking in the pre-World War II world. That's what we call trafficking, is white slavery. This is a long history, but it's obvious that Lowe's boys rushed this into production, and some of the numbers don't seem quite kosher. I'll grant that. It's still a great report. Everyone should still read it. But now, of course, because the numbers aren't wrong, case in point, one of the numbers for projected rape had it as 250,000. That's probably a real number in that the number of reports aggregate over 30 years get you 250,000 if you just dumb counted them up. But the problem is that I don't think it could possibly be that high. I think that is probably half that. It's probably half that because that would be like 1 in 20 women in the UK or something. 1 in 20 young women got raped, and it can't possibly be that high. In statistics, there's a problem where entries can be double counted to inflate the magnitude of something. So there are some methods where we score results and try to remove redundancies to avoid double counting. And obviously, I don't think the people who produced this rape gang inquiry did any of that. And so you get a number that looks, at best, suspect. But in this process, I have to see all of these pundits, these supposed authorities on data science, go into this report and just kind of like try to debunk it. Like, take the actual pieces of data. They go straight through the report. And do they try to internalize? Do they try to get a picture about what's going on? No, of course not. All they do is they go until they find something wrong, and then they circle it and highlight it, and they throw it back in the face and go like, oh, yeah, you need to fix this, fix this, fix this. And, they're kind of like gleeful while they do this. They're gleeful while this. So you have this woman here on my Twitter feed yesterday and today, just kind of laughing at all of the mistakes that are in the rape gang inquiry report. Ha 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 ha. Don't they know anything about peer-reviewed papers? Don't they know that they should have double fact-checked this and used scoring to remove redundancies? Don't they know the definition of this word? Isn't this mistake here just so silly? I shouldn't try to laugh. I shouldn't try to laugh when I'm reading these harrowing reports of people getting raped and sodomized and abused and tortured for 30 years. But I can't help but laugh when I read that in those 30 reports of the girls being continuously raped throughout the course of their teens and 20s, I can't help but laugh to think that probably 3 of those girls were redundant measurements. What are they even thinking? And again, it's the same people. It's the same people every single time. Older millennial women. I know where these women come from. There was another one too. I kind of grabbed these people at more or less random. The top left one is I can't remember her name. She is a woman who's doing the interview on the BBC, and then someone asks her about whether immigration increases housing costs, and then she just looked like this never occurred to me in a million years. The lady to the right is the interviewer for Sydney Sweeney, and on the bottom you have Helen Lewis and Michelle Goldberg, who are both kind of. I think Michelle Goldberg is a little bit more of a Gen Xer. But Helen Lewis is she's exactly my age. She is exactly my cohort of older millennial, educated political activists. And everywhere you go, trying to get people to respond to the reality, the crisis of what's going on, you run straight into this class of women. This class of women were people who were pushed through the system. So I saw all of these people dealing with the rape gang inquiry and the Belfast beheading and talking about how censorship is the solution to our racial issues in the 21st century. The problem is not the beheading. The problem is that Elon Musk let people find out about the beheading. Elon Musk not censoring us is the biggest problem in our country, not our completely declining social order that we see evaporating everywhere around us, not the complete collapse of trust. It's the fact that people are mean. I know how every one of these women got here. I feel like I've narrated it a few times before. There's a story behind these people. These girls they're all moderately intelligent millennial women. Almost all of them did not like math very much. They got into college And ordinarily, in a previous era, first of all, a lot fewer of these women would go to college. A lot fewer of them would have gone to college. But in a previous era, say in the 60s or 70s, when the culture of college campuses was not so thoroughly dominated by progressivism, these women all would have uniformly gone into things like French poetry or comparative literature or art history or something like that. Something that feels kind of, it's about things that are beautiful and clear and everyone agrees are good, or classical music or music composition like my own wife did. I learned the other day that my wife has the same degree that Caleb Hammer had, and I found that very, very entertaining. She just needs to master the budgeting disciplines of Caleb Hammer too, and we'll be golden. We'll be golden from that point on. But anyway, the where was I? These women in a previous era would have all gone into kind of arts and humanities, and they would have probably steered clear away from politics. And I know this because I knew a lot of these women in high school. In high school, these women always got straight A's in all of their classes. They liked reading, they liked theater, they liked music, but more than anything else, they liked not rocking the boat. They really steered away from student government because that was too contentious. That was like you had to compete with people and campaign, and they didn't want to do any of that. They steered away from the kids who liked reading Sartre and Camus and, smoking pot. I was kind of with that crowd for a while. You read The Stranger when you're 15 years old and you think that you're going to reinvent philosophy. You read Thus Spake Zarathustra. What's the other one people read? I don't know. Machiavelli's The Prince, which is ironic because at this stage of my life, Machiavelli is so influential. But it's like Machiavelli, The Prince, and Sartre, and Camus, not Sartre, it's Camus. Camus The Stranger, and that's it. That and a pack of and some pot and dark clothing, that will set you up for looking like a cool person. Now, I was never one of those people who was super into the whole the philosophy goth look, but I know that crowd because I was talking with philosophy and politics with them, even though I wasn't smoking pot because I was a straight lace. So I'm aware of the conversations, and I know who wasn't there. I know it wasn't these girls. These girls were not discussing larger philosophical issues. Neither were they in debate club, debating the merits of this policy or that. They didn't like philosophy. They didn't like politics that much. They didn't like student government that much. They were mostly about complying and being good, and on the side they kind of liked words and letters and stuff like that. They were definitely more, like most women, they were more word cell than they were shape rotator. They didn't want to get into a debate over capitalism or communism. They didn't want to hear about Nietzsche's gay science or whatever, or his opinion on this or that, or the Superman. This was all repellent to them. That was scary. That was contentious. Couldn't we just focus on, what we're actually doing here and now? Okay, fine. I don't think these women really want to be into politics whatsoever. And again, if they had gone to college in the 40s or 50s or 60s or 70s, these women would have all gone into arts and letters of a particular non-political persuasion. However, they get into college in 2000, and they're looking around and they're taking courses and they're kind of trying to dip their beak into what's going on and what's happening and what feels like a good major for them. One of the big problems they have is that unlike the 50s and 60s, in the 50s and 60s, getting a degree in economics or getting a degree in art history was not really considered that bad of a thing. This is one of the big problems with being a college student in the 2000s, is that most of the course offerings are in fields that you get made fun of for participating in. So for instance, you get an art history degree or a French degree like my mother did in, the 60s. I think she was French in the 70s. Yeah, that should be it. In the 70s, you get like a French degree or an art history degree or a poetry degree in comparative literature. And people are like, okay, you're not going to get that high paying of a job, but this thing called the college degree will distinguish you as part of the professional class. And that means you are qualified to be a secretary. You're qualified to enter the corporate workforce. This is an indication that you are part of the professional class. So that is a fair thing to do, is to get one of these degrees. In 2000s, it's no longer like that. Everyone, when you go into a comparative literature degree, makes fun of you as having a degree that is not going to make you any money and that is useless, and you're going to be poor on the other side of it. That's not very much fun. Moreover, all of these comparative lit classes, they're very schizophrenic. There's no story about why they matter. So the struggle in all academia is explain to me why this subject matters. Why it's important to learn this thing. Well, if you're in the 50s or 60s or 40s, 50s or 60s, then and you're learning about Shakespeare, you're learning about Chaucer, you're learning about Mozart, about Beethoven, about any number of these high culture things. You're reading Moby Dick, you're reading the Iliad, the Odyssey, you're reading the Greeks or whatever. All of these things are considered by the ambient culture to be good things. They're part of being a developed person. And by passing them on to the next generation, you are making the next generation also better people. There is no common narrative like that in the 2000s. By the 2000s, the colleges have already experienced 2 decades of diversification, which means that art history and letters and music don't have a coherent narrative about themselves. Plato and Aristotle and this challenging literature, all of that is just, at best, it is just one thread of a rainbow pattern that could also include African literature or Latino literature or Chinese literature, or most of the time you don't read actual Chinese literature, you read Chinese American grievance literature. But nonetheless, none of these things are actually good in of themselves. They're just part of a mosaic, and there's no real indication about why the book you're reading now really matters. Now, these girls are not going to do STEM. They hate numbers. That is too contentious for them. They were never shape rotators to begin with. It doesn't feel like a fit. So they're looking around for some class that makes them feel like they have a real purpose in life. And what do? They hit their first class, the mandatory social justice classes. They don't always call them social justice in my introductions, like dimensions of culture or whatever. It was a revelation for these women. They get into these classes, and sure enough, they're doing what they like doing, which is reading things, writing things, checking boxes, making things all nice and tidy. But the real advantage that these political classes have is that they have a story about why they matter. The reason why this class matters in a way that none of the other classes matter is that you're changing the world by being a political activist. We're having conversations in class about real issues that you can see in the news. And by being part of this class, you can have the right opinion about these subjects. You can have the right opinion about these political topics. That captures their imagination instantly. They're instantly able to see that now they can use their skills for a way that makes the world a better place. They can use their word cell qualities to actually move the ball forward, to make things better for people. And all of the college, everywhere, the entirety of the college is of one voice. The most important thing we can do in any of our departments is to make sure that the information, that the knowledge we generate is being used for the greater cause of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So even the engineering department, even the physics department has to make statements to the effect that we are doing this for the good of democracy, of diversity, of equality, of the American vision where everyone thrives. So immediately, in the eyes of the millennial woman, it feels like you've hit the jackpot Politics is your religion. It's a way of mattering. It's the way of fighting. You get to fight people without there being a contention because the other side isn't present. And college professors ensure that if there's any disagreement, the progressive side always wins. Moreover, I should say, in addition to the progressive side always winning, a certain number of perspectives are just outright excluded because they are considered hateful or undiverse or inequitable by the authorities. You're not going to read any of the authors that people in our circle like reading. You're not going to get any of those perspectives. So immediately, these women come in contact with a political science and a political literature and a political art that is all just focused around current thing and current thing ideology. They graduate with high marks and they immediately get hired right into the government apparatus, the prestige media, into NGOs, into charities, into media orgs. And they stay there for 15 years. They stay there for 15 years as the young up-and-coming person who's making a big dent in media. And they have never, in their entire existences, had to actually deal with real politics or having their ideas challenged in a real way. All of the discussions they have been fake, have been kind of scrimmage matches between them and a Potemkin enemy. All of their disagreements with their colleagues have immediately deferred to them because they're trying to get gender diversity inside the institutions. You can't disagree with one of these girl boss journalist types. And so you see people like Michelle Goldberg or Helen Lewis or any of these people who are apparently running the government of Belfast or going on BBC's Question Time and not being aware that mass immigration causes the demand for housing to increase. They have never heard an opposing opinion. Now, they're convinced that all of their opponents' opinions are trivially easy to defeat. But if they are ever to encounter an opinion from an opponent, they almost cannot represent it accurately. They have to scoff at it. They have to grimace at it. They have to kind of whistle by the graveyard. They have to reframe. They have to recalibrate. They have to escape. They have to insult. They have to psychologize. They have to do anything and everything as opposed to actually engaging with the real political issue because their degree wasn't in politics. The entire political apparatus of the modern world is apolitical. They have no understanding of even what politics is. They have no understanding what discourse is. They have no understanding what any kind of contention would be or how you could even possibly move society in a way against the values that you were taught in college. It's not an ontological category that exists. The idea that we could say that Britain needs to get less diverse is not an ontologically correct category for these women. That is an incorrect grammatical statement. They can't say something like the international community is bad. They can't say we need less diversity. They can't think these things. They can't think environmentalism has gone too far. They can't think that traditional hierarchies actually have some advantages. They can't countenance these notions. Their opponents exist in a category that is excluded by their entire ontology. And so they can only kind of spellcast at it. They throw out the quips and the rhetorical tricks that they were taught in a college classroom and in the preceding 15 years of their career with the hopes that these quips and framings are going to banish this evil idea into the nether region, and so they can go on pontificating about how capitalism is evil, even though they have no idea what comes after it and don't even really care. So they can quip about how great diversity is while never having to really deal with the consequences of diversity. Where they can talk about other people's privilege while occupying a position inside institutions that would only be given to them because they wielded privilege over all of their competitors. Politics is female in the 21st century. I mean, politics is not female. Politics is always a masculine art. But in between us and actually doing politics and seeking political Solutions is this huge barrier of apolitical gunk. An apparatus that generates infinite words and infinite propaganda, but never materially moves in any direction. It just affirms itself. It affirms itself again and again and again. It affirms, it affirms, it affirms the status quo. It affirms the status quo. It affirms the status quo. Oh, I criticize capitalism. Yeah, but that's affirming the status quo. The religion of the modern managerial state, even though it 100% relies on finance capital, has been for the last 100 years to criticize capitalism while you do it. Just like the Chinese Communist Party. China does the exact same thing. They are completely slaves to techno-capital, yet all the while they play the techno-capital game, they do so in the name of defeating capitalism. They may say they're revolutionary. They may say that they fight privilege, but they rely on it for everything that they do. For the simple fact that they can't operate without it. As soon as their privilege goes away, their dialectic is destroyed. Maybe I'll skip forward here. There is a problem, and I don't exactly know how to solve it. Well, this is the great issue of our age. The great issue of our age is that women in social media, plus institutional feminism, create this kind of runaway juggernaut where a whole section of the governing order becomes completely unaccountable to reality, completely unaccountable to discourse. A great example of this, and maybe I'll skip around here. Now, let me check my slides here. I'm trying to figure out what order I want to do this in. Maybe I'll do it in this order. You can see this most prominently in the issue of dating and mating discourse. It is really very obvious at this stage that there is no coherent solution to the problems of gender in the modern world that is coming from the left. They have no idea what's going on. They talk about it endlessly, but they have no idea what's going on. A great example is this. A great example is this. This is a sad, I'm skipping ahead in the slides, but this is a sad story that kind of illustrates my point. There have been numerous instances in the last month of really harrowing stories of homosexuals taking abusive roles in children's lives. And this comes on the heel of several other stories of abuse like this. The latest one was a couple who adopted a child and then proceeded to rape it to death. I'm going to get my stream banned for saying that, but that's what happened. And our system facilitated this because we needed to prioritize LGBTQ rights. The parental rights of men to adopt children is so prominent. It's so prominent. It's so amazingly important that we do this. For a second, can you think of this? Can you think of this happening? How likely would I be if I were an unmarried guy? How wouldn't it raise a red flag if I just tried to adopt a child without a woman in my life whatsoever? I'm just a single guy. I'm just a single guy. I want to adopt a baby. I think I'd get kicked out immediately for that request. I would not have a coherent story to tell. Yet somehow, if you put two guys together, then they themselves become a marriage, and a marriage becomes a family. And a family kind of becomes like a straight family with, I don't like the word straight, but a normal family with like a mother and a father. Therefore, one of the guys must be like a mother. And they must want the kid for the same reason that a woman wants a kid. Not the same reason that any randomly selected men would want a child who were obsessed with children. Kind of like a woman and a man married to a woman would want a child. Like they're doing the exact same thing heterosexuals are doing. They just happen to be men. The only reason, and again, it's not this instance. We've seen 3 or 4 examples of these gay men horrifically abusing children that have occurred in the last year. And this is for something that should almost never happen. There should almost never be an incident where 2 men are able to adopt a child under the assumption that they're a family. The only reason why they're considered a family is that they fought tooth and nail to have that word associated with them, even though it means absolutely not the same thing. There are families that they get to adopt. And furthermore, thanks to the magic of surrogacy, all of the regulations around adoption are completely waived. You can basically have a woman bear a child for you, and then the surrogacy contract completely doesn't, well, from what I'm told at least if I'm listening to Allie Beth Stuckey, I probably shouldn't be listening to her. But if I'm to believe that the sources I've told, this is a huge loophole for obtaining adoptions because the contract pre-exists the child's existence. The child does not have the ordinary protections that would be if they went through an ordinary adoption agency. There is not the same types of controls. There's not the same kinds of protections. And so, hold on, I'm going to reset this here. What you see is kind of a perverse system that is kind of feeding on itself. There's no logic that justifies this. There's no kind of way that you can explain to me what's going on here without reference to ideology. It's obviously perverse. And the only thing that people have is kind of pleading along ideological grounds. I'm kind of curious. I'm just checking on the stream, guys. I will come back to it in a second. I always hit these asides for a podcast, but I need to make sure that the thing's actually registering chats and super chats properly. Otherwise, I won't be able to highlight them. For some reason, the latest super chat did not come through. I'm not so sure why, but we'll deal with this later. I'm just going to deal with we'll sort out the stream eccentricities later and then just focus on actually delivering content. What I want to say is that when you look at the actual claims of the LGBT community, you actually coherently look at what they're asking for and the narratives of themselves. They all don't make sense. They don't make sense internally, coherently, consistently. They're just a series of requests for special pleading. They do not make sense from the perspective of what's good for society. All they are is a set of requests, a set of demands, and a set of special interests. And that's more or less the same thing that you see when we have modern gender relationships. This is a picture of, was Alex Cooper? I can't remember who she's talking to. Alex Cooper runs this podcast called, it's named Call Her Daddy. I have no idea where that name comes from. Probably some kind of BDSM thing. Who knows? What is interesting about Call Her Daddy? Well, what's interesting about Call Her Daddy is that it is the most popular podcast for women to listen to. And of course, because women are listening to it, it's all sex talk. The thing about the sex talk is that in the 2000s, it was broadly considered that we were traveling towards some kind of end state of reality. There was some kind of state of reality that we were traveling towards. We were going to be moving towards a more liberated way of doing things. And because of that, there was going to be a point where we reached where things would start making sense. But modern sex show, so I always list this example. This would be like Dan Savage, right? This would be like Dan Savage, and he was the guy that was going to solve sex for the world. He was going to solve sex for the world because he was going to make it good, giving, and game. And he had a set of rules, and they were all coherent, and they were all fair between straights and gays. And if you followed these rules, you'd be off to the races, and you'd have a fulfilling sex life just like everybody else. That pretense is totally gone from Call Her Daddy. Call Her Daddy does not make sense. It doesn't need to make sense. All it is just women celebrating each other and validating each other for perverse, bad behavior. Oh, I dumped my husband and shacked up with another guy. Oh, you go, girl. I slept with so many men. Total validation, total support. And they'll give people advice. They'll give men advice, they'll give women advice. But the advice is only what makes them feel good in the moment. You're plugged when you watch Alex Cooper. You are essentially watching a validation machine posing as some kind of view of the world, and it's not. It's like saying that my therapist is the person who has the most sober view of the world because they always tell me what makes me feel the best about myself. That is the same thing with the Call Her Daddy podcast. It is women validating themselves. It's women being able to, it's women playing into a mode that they appreciate, but it generates no useful information about the world. It essentially exists in a little bit of a bubble. And so they can talk endlessly about sex for the entirety of this show's existence. It's been on the air for 6 years, I think, Call Her Daddy. It's been on for at least 3. It was an established podcast when Kamala was running in 2024. And they endlessly talk about sex, yet all of their ideas contradict each other. Oh, we will tell men to be good and give women everything they want. And then we tell everyone that we don't like nice guys. We like bad boys. If you know how to translate female emotions, then that makes perfect sense. If you know how to translate what women mean from the subtext of how they speak, then obviously you know what it means when they say these things. But that is not what is actually going on. What is actually going on is that when this goes out into podcast world, when it's heard third, fourth hand, these actually become the opinions of the women who are listening to it. So it's essentially like you're interacting with some vibe-based meme culture. Isaac Simpson, I might get to this slide later. But, I'll cover it now a little bit. Increasingly we are moving into a mode where the Democrat Party is the girl party and the Republican Party is the boy party. That is what is happening. Male versus female on a political stage. And the question is, how do we get out of this problem? Women are obviously getting preferential positions when it comes to staffing NGOs and government bureaucracies and prestige media positions. They're ideologically locked into some position that makes them feel validated, and they're completely impervious to challenges through discourse. The obvious solution is to remove this somehow, but the problem is no one knows how. And here's the issue, is that as long as our political division in this country is man versus woman, then men and women will continue to hate each other because women will see men as an enemy. Women cannot view a political opponent as anything other than an implacable enemy. They have no ability to perceive political differences in a mode of camaraderie or adversarial friendship. Women cannot process this emotion. I could be wrong, but when was the last time women got on the wrong side of you in a major political issue and said, okay, we can agree to disagree and we're still friends? Well, if they say that, that means they don't really care about politics. But as soon as women believe that politics is something that matters and politics is something that is important for the safety of the country, which it is, women will perceive a disagreement with their political opinions as an attack on them, on their persons. And when women feel like they're being attacked as a person, they will immediately lash out on their attackers in any way, shape, or form they can, which means that by fostering this division between the boy party and the girl party, we are essentially making it impossible for men and women to date each other on a large scale. And I say, is the gender war a regime complete problem in this instance? The problem is basically stemming from two nodes of the modern world. Maybe we could say three. We can do them in reverse. We can do them in reverse order. First of all, it is obvious that if men and women vote in opposition to each other in an environment where politics cannot be unimportant, they will grow to hate each other. And our species will die. Feminism encourages this frame. Feminism pours gasoline on the fire of the gender war, and it encourages women to see themselves as the adversaries of men. Furthermore, social media spaces mean that women are essentially able to go into a rhetorical cycle completely independent of the social feedback of men or of reality. This is the Alex Cooper effect. Alex Cooper can give 5 years of bad dating advice, and all of it contradicts itself. None of it is coherent. We can go for 10 years commending absolute insanity, like gay men should be able to adopt children, and no one will correct them, because this is just a machine for producing self-validation. It is nothing more than that, and no one will object, and no one will disrupt that, because the machine is not designed for any kind of exterior discourse. Third, in addition to that general group chat problem, there is the additional problem with women on social media. And that is that women are addicted to it. The issue is that social media, all women are incredibly status focused. They have a response, they have a belief that, well, not belief, that's ridiculous, that women naturally gravitate towards what they consider to be a socially acceptable thing. Validation, that's how they measure it. I want to be a socially acceptable person in the group because socially acceptable people deserve things, and being a woman who deserves things is the most important thing for me to be. It's the most important thing for me to be. Therefore, how do I know that I deserve things? Well, I know I deserve things when other people validate me. So women always have their antenna out for self-validation in any ordinary circumstances. But usually, the social environment validates women just naturally. They can feel the approval or disapproval of a room that includes men and then includes other stakeholders in their actual lives. Once social media kicks off, once the female group chat kicks off, that is no longer the case. Now they're getting their validation from inside the social media sphere, which means that they plug into these validation engines, like the Call Her Daddy podcast, like everything else, and they just get this idea that the way that I can be the most deserving is by playing into the political priorities of this process writ large. The political realities of the political preferences of my group chat, of my podcast fandom. Validate each other, validate the regime, and shit on the people on the outside, which are usually men or who they perceive as low status men. This is incredibly pathological and it needs to end. And the problem is that it seems to be a regime complete problem at scale. The current regime benefits from this situation because it is able to be the beneficiary of groups of voters who are inclined to always vote for the powers that be, to maintain the deep state's ideology in perpetuity, to make sure that Ireland and England and America keep on doubling down on the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, even though all of these values are absolutely destroying our societies. Again, not all women, but this is the cycle that we're stuck in. And this is how also you see social contagions percolating through the system. as can be really seen in the group chats I've been at. This is why divorce is contagious. Divorce is contagious because people go into group chats as divorcees, and they're able to completely dominate in those spaces because they are the people who are the most invested in making it seem like they deserve more. They deserve more compassion. They deserve more resources. And slowly, the complaints, the squeaky wheel always gets the grease, and they rise to the top. And the same function is happening to our societies writ large. The obvious solution, and this is the thing that everyone's kind of coming to, and what do you really care about more? Do you care more about your ability to vote? Or do you care more about having a society, living in a society where men and women don't hate each other? I care more about living in a society where men and women don't hate each other. Now, I mean, look, what's so funny about this, obviously, is if you say, I think democracy sucks and we need a monarchy, then these very same women in the group chats who are all ramped up on feminism, they won't care if you say we should abolish democracy and put in a monarchy. But if you say, let's abolish the 19th Amendment, they will absolutely lose their shit, even though the later is simply a subset of the former. They lose their vote either way. Why do they care? Well, for reasons of validation, for reasons of deserving, for reasons of FOMO, the fear of missing out. But what does it really matter if we have a right to vote and there are no more families? What does it matter if we can vote and there are no more marriages and no more babies? What does it matter if we have something called democracy, but our society totally falls apart, collapses into civil war? Civil war is a cliche. Collapses into chaos is more likely. There's not like a civil war brewing that Tim Pool always implies. There are no military units ready to go to war with each other, but collapses into total chaos and dysfunctionality. You see that happening everywhere. That discussion frames the crisis of female political agency. The same crisis that impedes all democracies, just faster. Which is, how do you handle power constantly being bled into unaccountable authorities? We have a discourse class that can't discourse. We have a ruling class that can't rule. We have media, adversarial media, that is not actually adversarial to the designs of the broader state. And we have revolutionaries that say that they're against capitalism, but then spend their career just reasserting the status quo and the path that we're on. We're on the journey to a new, more diverse, more equitable future, just like they always say. Something has to give. Some big change is needed. And it's funny, you can walk, people are beginning to see this. I always hate that cliche. The cliche that people are waking up and saying this, but you see this and again, you see this again and again, people looking at their leaders and wondering, okay, what actually has to give in this situation? What actually has to change so that some other future is possible rather than just treading water? Do we have to abolish the 19th Amendment or abolish democracy? Or just reroute around the institutions? Do we need a coup to replace our regime? To restore our regime? We need a radical change of some variety, because the only thing that this process, like I don't need to worry about where Alex Cooper is going. I know where she is. I don't need to think, oh, maybe Helen Lewis is going to radically change her opinions and what we need to do. Helen Lewis's opinions and Michelle Goldberg's opinions and the mayor of Belfast's opinions and all of these political women's opinions will always be the exact same thing. It will always be in the same mold of moderate, progressive, validate yourself, validate the status quo. It will never deviate from that except in weird, superficial ways when something immediately hurts them. If crime gets too high in their areas, they will want a crackdown and broken windows policing. If trans women humiliated them in public, then they'll become TERFs temporarily. If they feel that gay men are too big for their britches and need to be taken down a notch, maybe they'll put restrictions on gay surrogacy. But other than just damping down on the things that immediately impact their lives and their quests for self-validation, no change will come out of the system ever, because the people inside of it are not actually doing politics. they're in a group chat cycle. And one of two things have to end. Democracy has to end, or female use of social media has to end, or social media at large has to end. I guess that's three things. Or the human race has to end, which I guess is maybe Silicon Valley's preferred solution to this problem. Better we destroy the human race than us offend the sensibilities of women. Because I don't see any other way out of this. Right now in Belfast, right after the grooming gang report and the beheading and Henry Nowak and their own cities descending into absolute chaos and the escalating crime rates and the unaffordability of houses and the declining social trust, right now at this moment, all of the professional women are protesting in favor of more diversity. And they're protesting in favor of more diversity, not because they've had any positive experience of diversity, not because they feel that Indian or Pakistani men are better than the native Irish men or Scottish men that they're around. They are protesting in favor of diversity because being in favor of diversity makes you a big, important person in the group chat. And they remember from their college educations that being in favor of diversity, equity, and inclusion is the thing that makes you win. It's the thing that makes you the good person who matters. Do they know why diversity is good? Of course they don't. Do they know that why equality is good? I mean, maybe some of them will give you the Rawlsian veil of ignorance if they're really educated, but most of them don't have an argument for equality, and they certainly don't have an answer for any of the common answers to the Rawlsian veil of ignorance. They just know that Rawls and veil of ignorance are word spells that they can cast so that they can move on to the next step of validation. They're not actually having a conversation. They're not actually thinking about some future state of the universe. They're just in a cycle. And so one of the cycles has to end, the political cycle or the social media cycle. I guess this brings me on to the next topic. I was asked to do this, and it's something that, well, I mean, let's take this in a different direction here. So I was at the OGC National Conference this weekend, and it was fun. I was actually a blast. I had more fun at the conference, the national conference this year, than I've had in any of the previous 4 years. Just the perfect mixture of getting to discuss intellectual issues and seeing people organize in real life and really accomplish things. I mean, I don't know how much I'm supposed to disclose, but just publicly, I know that it is a fact that we have 42 public chapters at this stage. And so it's growing to the point where if you're in a reasonably populated area, this is an option for you to go forward. And there are very well put together guys there. Certainly the guys who show up to the conferences and even the guys on the ground that I've seen are really great guys. And it's something that's very, very encouraging seeing this process play out and seeing people take next steps. But for myself, being kind of this nerdy guy who likes to talk about ideas, I was chiefly concerned, but just the kind of various ideas that are floating around. And all of a sudden I published my speech about Karl Marx and degenerative social media cycles that kind of touches on the subject of this live stream. But one of the most interesting talks this year was, I think, well, it wasn't really a direct talk, but it was Aaron McIntyre's discussion of Henry Jaffa and Leon Strauss. And these are the people who built the neocon movement, right? And Jaffa was obviously the person who, more than anyone else, I think, exported Straussianism to the neocons that came out of NYU in the 60s and 70s, all ex-Trotskyists. And Leon Strauss himself was Leo Strauss, I think it was. He was a Jewish refugee from the Holocaust who was trying to address the issue of adopting liberalism and universalism for the modern world. And, Aaron is excellent at explaining these complicated authors. I had read Strauss in undergraduate. I had a collection of essays. I read them because I was trying to refute the leader of my reading group, this extracurricular reading group that I was involved with, and he was a big neocon. not like in the George W. Bush sense, but in the intellectual sense. And I thought, I'm going to read Strauss and prove him wrong. And then when I read Strauss, I'm like, this guy has kind of a point here. This is insightful. But no, of course, Aron is much better read, and his reading comes from less than 20 years ago. So, obviously, I'm not really in a position to argue with him. But ultimately, what I kind of see in Strauss is attempting to come up with a noble lie that will sustain liberalism as an international order. There has to be some vision of a universal human value that can organize modern states that works better than communism does, basically. And so this is how Strauss kind of resurrects this idea of America as a propositional nation, less so as kind of a property of a people, which was how propositional nation was used previously, and more like a political formula for justifying the expansion of Americanism as an opposing force to communism. And this is why it's obviously so popular among the neocons. And this is something that is obviously problematic for us right now, because this sort of cynical political formula that was launched by Strauss has in fact become the operative identity of most Western countries. This is a huge block that is sort of waiting for us, especially in Red America. Everyone in Red America believes that that we are a propositional nation, that we do not have a peoplehood that extends through ethnicity and religion, but rather through some kind of relationship to these founding documents. And Aron's very good at laying this out. But I am of the opinion that what Strauss was doing is in some sense necessary. There does need to be an international moral order that reigns over other nations to limit the destructiveness, at least of technology. And in that sense, a Straussian kind of noble lie is necessary to have at the center. And in the process of arguing this, I kind of came up with just this revelation of mine that the true test of right-wing ideas, I mean, in the short term, to push back against the insanity, the biggest opportunity for right-wing parties everywhere is to devour the center-right. We need to make sure that Restore devours Reform and the Tory party in the UK. Similarly, with hard right parties on the continent. Similarly, we need to totally take over the GOP and get rid of the neocons. We need to make neoconservatism to be a political non-starter in America. And certainly Aaron McIntyre is doing yeoman's work on that front. But the vision that was inspired by this conversation on Strauss, at least in my own mind, is this absolute certainty in my own imagination that permanent change will only really begin in blue states. That effective resistance in the short term must begin among conservative communities and in red states. But permanent, long-lasting changes in how people think has to start in part in the blue states. I know that I'm going to be on his talk, on his podcast. So I'm going to keep this short. But this puts me in mind of a survey I want to do on the left. So what's wrong with Blue America? What's wrong with Blue America? Well, Blue America has several problems. The first problem is that it's totally dominated by female politics. It is totally dominated by female politics, and female politics are enthralled to this center-left construction that has been put in place as an amalgamation between American liberalism and older radical progressive ideas that descend from communism through the Frankfurt School. And this combination has totally enthralled the government apparatuses of blue areas. And that's fine. The problem is that increasingly everyone's beginning to realize that this kind of reigning female ideology is not working. And they're looking towards something else. And so what is interesting and what's kind of fruitful for myself is to think about these things in terms of where everyone is going. I'm going to take a pause here. For some reason, my dock is not working correctly. I'm kind of wondering if I redock this, will it actually work? It's interesting. I can only highlight things in the event that they are here. Okay. Well, we'll sort this out later. If nothing works, then I'll just have to figure out a way that I can that I can do this without actually. There. I guess it reloaded anyway. All right. Well, we'll see what happens. It reloaded. This whole reader is not very good. I apologize, but we'll see what happens. Yeah. See, in order to highlight super chats, I actually need to get this to work. So let me just take a second. Oh well, it is what it is. The show must go on. Obviously, my ability to redesign my setup here is not going to work very well live. Anyway, the question is really where these parties are going. So on the right and in red states, in conservative movements in Europe, on the continent, or in Great Britain, it is very easy to see where people are going. People used to be conservative and they're going to become nationalists. That is the route. That is the only future that is available for the right. Or they're going to join the managerial center. That is the only future that is available for the right at this stage. There is no other future. Blue America, the cities, the managerial class, that's where things get interesting because there is no real coherent future. You've got a bunch of parties that are in alliance with each other against the right, but there's no coherent worldview inside any of them. There's no coherent organizing principle. I don't know, but I don't think that the center can really hold. On the left, it's really interesting to watch people like Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein's a moron, and he's the most boring man alive, personally speaking. But he's dealing with a genuine political problem. He is trying to figure out how he can get the Democrats to win without going woke. I always like this picture of the left wing here. These are the leftist YouTubers. When you juxtapose this against the pictures of the guys at the Old Glory Conference, it is something very, very special. It's a study in contrast. Yeah, you just look at such oblong people, such weird people. There are twice as many trans women in this crowd than there are biological women, and the rest of the biological cis men are just these twisted specimens. It's really quite a thing to behold. But this kind of depicts a crisis in the left currently. Inside cities, what you have is you have a bunch of very, very, very risk-averse female PMCs. You've got sometimes their husbands, their mates, their white male PMCs that have managed to get through the great filter of affirmative action and actually make a very large salary and have not been tempted by progressivism in any way. Progressivism in its modern form being deeply antithetical to masculinity in any regard, to the point where Democrats sort of a synonym for unmasculine characters. We could call this the George Planter problem or the Talrico problem, right? Every one of their new white male allies is this kind of plastic person that walks around and talks like a Muppet. Either that or they're obviously ex-working class and their own audience disowns them and casts them into the outer darkness. The problem with the political formulas going forward is that the sort of female girl bosses rely and always prefer stability. They like posing as radicals. They like talking about how they want to abolish capitalism. They are not actually a revolutionary force. And the second that the radical left moves in a revolutionary direction, and that revolutionary direction is not 100% supported by the establishment media, the way it was during the Black Lives Matter era, immediately some of the progressive girl bosses start jumping ship. On the other hand, inside the radical left, there is a division between the people who are more on the cultural left and the third world lumpen proletariat. I use lumpen proletariat kind of loosely. This is the reason why there are no real communists in the modern world. And it's not because they're not Marxists. There are Marxists, there are fake Marxists among the PMC girl bosses, and there are fake Marxists among academics like Michael Burns and Ben Burgess and all of this stuff. But these Marxists have no revolutionary ambition. They LARPing as Marxists. Their ambition is to become a professor like Noam Chomsky and to endlessly critique power from a comfortable sinecure at the universities. They don't actually want to hang the bourgeoisie. They do not actually want revenge. I mean, I guess they want revenge in the form of financial remunerations against their opponents, but they do not actually want to radically change the system. They have no stomach for it. And their pretension to be communist is more or less just a giant LARP. On the other hand, you have an increasingly large population of people from the third world who just want revenge against white people generally. They just don't like white people. And keeping these sort of three horses in tow is the great balancing act of the modern left. And even with all three of these parties, they still have no real good coherent principle for which to actually get people to believe. The product they have going forward is obviously something that is fake. That is the great problem with progressivism in the modern world. Is that it is obviously fake. The girl bosses, the people who work for the New York Times and write prestigious articles about our great liberal, diverse masters who rule over us and have benefited with us from enrichment for the third world, they depend on a certain amount of validation because the second they don't get it, they feel like frauds. And indeed they are, because their worldview makes absolutely no sense. At the same time, the white revolutionaries LARPing as Marxists and communists need to have this idea that they're part of some kind of sweeping correction of justice that will imminently deliver socialism or communism to them, with their brown and black allies in tow. This is also becoming a hard illusion to maintain. The problem is it is very lucrative to be a leftist. It is very comfortable to be a leftist. It is very validating to be a leftist. But there's something believable about the story that leftism tells about itself. Whether you're a girl boss or one of the third worldists or one of the LGBTQ people, no one really believes that you're bringing in a new world order anymore. They all say that you're basically out for number one. And increasingly, it's impossible to deny that you are. So what it seems to me is that there's an enormous instability, especially among the white left. As the third world grows in prominence inside these coalitions, it is going to demand more and more and more, especially as someone like Mamdani turns out to be, as I hypothesize he will be, more of somebody who's looking to rob the system than to actually impose any kind of good government socialism. And once the money runs out on one of these revolutionary candidates, you'll see what Mamdani puts first. And what he puts first is not the ideology of rich Marxist theater kids from Bard College. It is not. It will be his own ethnic interests 100% of the time. And the same thing is true. I mean, in some sense, I mentioned this before. Hassan Piker is important because of the role he plays in this illusion that the third world leftists and the first world leftists are working towards the same cause. They obviously are not. They obviously know that they are not generating some kind of alternative to the system, that insofar as they are executing a revolution, they're just looting from people. They are not actually creating a new order to rule the West. And when this realization starts to dawn on people, in particular the professional classes, they will start looking around to make a change. And I think this incident, this turnover, has the possibility of radically reforming the world, reforming the Western world. At some point, white leftists are going to have an identity crisis, and they will have to decide what they actually want to leave behind in the world. And I think that this could have a radical cascading impact on what it means to be left-wing or right-wing in this country, a kind of realignment of sorts. And for this reason, I think there's a critical point, a critical moment that is going to occur in Blue America. And I think that the blue state right wing is where you really want to look. And this is I'm having like this fake argument with Aaron McIntyre at this stage where we're arguing about red states and blue states and this and that. But it is really important to understand the distinction. Namely that not the distinction. Obviously, there's a distinction between red state and blue state, and I just lost my train of thought here because it's getting infernally hot in this room. I think that the instability in blue states is going to create a change. I think their divorce from techno capital is going to create a change. I think that their divorce from the third world is going to create a change. And that there's going to be a new opportunity to create a separate place on the inside of blue communities that did not exist before. You cannot rule America from rural locations. And you cannot rule America with populist culture. The question of the age is not who rules Israel. It's not who rules the Middle East, although their energy resources are important. That is not the real question. The real question is who rules North America and Europe, which is one reason why I've always de-emphasized Zionism in my thoughts here. The question is who is ruling North America, and North America is ruled from its cities. This is something that oftentimes a lot of red Americans do not understand. Cities are technology. They're specifically technology because they're the only way that you can get enough population density around a given area in order to have elites that trust each other. Case in point would be the old Glory Club itself. I mean, look, all clubs and social orders, and maybe people are right about this. Maybe elites in the digital age can be fostered independently of cities, but it would be unprecedented. Usually, elites are formed because there is a certain economic class that emerges in cities, and they trust each other because they see each other every day. They live around each other. They have bonds of friendship around each other. They can exist in that way. They are naturally, organically formed political coalitions. This is what I think Red America fundamentally misunderstands about Blue America. Their ideas are fake. Their ideology is silly and insane. But in many ways, their formation as a political elite is as organic as it comes. If you go to college or you live in a blue city throughout your 20s, everyone around you will reinforce the same class interests and the same morality communicated through the media there. The fact that they're insane and stupid and degenerate is actually their biggest problem right now. The fact that they're all in a few metropolitan areas is the biggest asset. They can operate as a cohesive whole. The second people, enter into a conference, they talk together as people about a common collective interest in an embodied way, and not as sort of a derivation of an algorithm or the derivation of a group chat. Immediately, political realities become more focused and more clear, and people can actually move forward to accomplish things. This is a utility that Red America always underestimates. And it is the same thing that generates cohesive rule. Having a group of people that have organic political bonds, not through an enemy that are both dedicated to a radical political end and are not born from just like watching Fox News occasionally. They're together, they're in the same place with the same economic interests, and they're all focused on a radical future vision. And the people there are all dedicated or young or energetic. That is the formula for political change. Geographically distributed people, much, much harder to do. Now, in some sense, the OGC is designed to fight this, but it can only fight it so much because that organic proximity, along with a proximity towards a population, a client population, is critical. It's essential. And this is something that really distinguishes elite culture from plebeian culture. And this gets us to kind of the next topic I want to talk about, like the America 250 celebration. This is my favorite picture of them all. So America is gearing up for its 250th anniversary. And Trump, I mean, first of all, as many people have pointed out, including Kevin Deanna, nobody cares. I mean, like, look, Trump cares. Some people in Red America care. There's going to be a good party. It's going to be epic. It's going to be fun, but no one really cares about it the way they cared about our bicentennial in 1976. In 1976, everyone stopped and celebrated America, and it was like you can still find artifacts from the American bicentennial. Now, what is it, 50 years later? 50 years later, you can still find artifacts from this one moment where we came together and celebrated America's bicentennial. Now we're coming up on 250. Not nobody cares, but almost no one cares, to the point where almost all large media acts that Trump has tried to recruit for a celebration have bailed on him. Because the media class hates Trump more than they love America. They would rather flip the bird to Trump than be seen with their fellow Americans celebrating 250 years of their country. They hate Trump more than they love America. So Trump is, he is left with the unenviable task of celebrating a variety of birthdays, including his own birthday recently, and the anniversary of the U.S. military, and a variety of big anniversary landmarks leading up to the anniversary of 1776. He is left doing that with just the tools from basically Red American culture. Kid Rock, UFC fighting, motorsports, people doing wheelies and backflips on motorcycles, all that, brass band, Navy brass bands, and I do love Navy brass bands, celebrations on the Washington Monument and renovations, all great, but all kind of missing something critical. And, this is what I was talking about when I talked about Charlie Kirk's memorial service. There's a difference between Hobbit parties and Dark Elf parties. There's a difference between the kind of funeral that is a funeral that's fun to be at and that's affirming to be at, and a funeral that you're ashamed not to be at. The 250th anniversary of America, as Trump envisions it, is going to be a fun time. It will probably be a better party than whatever the Democrats cook up. Look, the Democrats can't throw good holiday parties. Their parties suck. Progressives haven't been able to throw good parties since 2013. After 2013, progressives' ability to throw parties has been absolutely deplorable. Anyone remember that big convention of what was it? It was her Tumblr, right? The Tumblr convention. They had a big Tumblr party, and all it was this giant warehouse with this ball pit in the middle of it that looked like the saddest thing you'd ever seen. All progressive parties are like the Tumblr parties after 2013. They are all renditions of past glories. They're all attempts to put in the numbers, and everyone there is more interested in what's going on their phones than what's going on in real life. Now, Red America has way more vitality than Blue America does. And that's good, and that's healthy. And at the Old Glory Club conference, there was an enormous feeling of vitality. You could cut it in the air. It was like last year, but even more so. These are people who are getting things done, that are doing things in the real world, and nobody sucked into their phone. Well, in the OGC's case, it's because we banned phones at events, which I think is going to be common practice going forward. But in the meantime, even if phones were there, the people are locked into reality. They're locked into a mission. There's a kind of vitality there. But what there isn't is a vision that's been brought together by an organic elite. The thing that marks high culture as apart from anything else. These are people who are celebrating a sacred moment. And the problem is that motocross events and UFCs don't really communicate that. The military does to a certain degree, and that will definitely be a component to that. But there's no feeling that something sacred is going on, something that is meaningful, something that is permanent. It all feels like an entertainment product. It all feels like something that's designed to entertain an audience, not actually to celebrate something that is a magnificent moment in time. That was the problem with Charlie Kirk's funeral. Charlie Kirk's funeral felt vital. It felt energetic. It felt like a place you'd want to be among the people who had vitality and who were your friends. It did not feel like a holy moment. It didn't. There are moments where it kind of felt a little bit like a holy moment. Moments in Erica's speech or in Tucker's speech, but they were fleeting moments and they didn't carry over. They were not moments where you would say, I'm going to remember where I was when I watched this funeral. I am going to remember forever that I was at that funeral. I'm going to tell my children that I was at that funeral. I don't think that America at 250 is going to be an event where you're going to say, I am going to tell my children I was at the America 250th anniversary celebration. I'm going to tell my children that I stood with my president. It's not going to be one of those celebrations. It can't be. It can't be because the tools that are used are just not present. I guess I've mentioned this before. There is an aesthetic divide. And an aesthetic vacuum on the right now. I'm really feeling it distinctly. And it will take a while to develop, but it's something that you feel in your bones when you want to have something that communicates that you have a community around you that is experiencing sadness and the solemnity of our moment and giving it the proper space that it needs. And that this is sort of the most high and meaningful thing anybody could be doing in this moment. You're kind of witnessing a unique event, a unique passing of a time, and that you're doing what is right in that moment. I mean, there's, if I was to say there's one guiding aesthetic to Red America, it would be this. Like, this is the sentiment, like, from the most cocked show, the most Reddit brain show of all time is Rick and Morty, and everyone makes fun of it. And they should make fun of it because it's a terrible show. It's metamodernism. It's postmodernism collapsing into itself in real time. It is a slop show, but it has occasional moments of genius. And in this moment, I think that this captures kind of the aesthetic motivating thought of Red America. Your boos mean nothing. I have seen what makes you cheer. It is the middle finger. That's not enough. So the two aesthetic forces that we have going forward from Red America are your boos mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer. And I want to let everyone know that God is my witness. I feel this too. I don't give a shit about what Blue America boos at. I don't give a shit about what Blue America boos at. And I kind of like the vitality that I still see on display in Red America. But I don't want to flip off the boos of Blue America. I'm tired of it. I'm sure, like, okay, yes, I pissed off the girl bosses and the weird gender goblins and the vampiric Silicon Valley people and the absolute nitwits at the New York Times. I've pissed them all off. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in rage bait anymore. What I want is something that I can actually genuinely cheer at. I want a motion of vitality. And this is kind of where I find myself now here. You know, what do we cheer? What do healthy people actually get together and celebrate? There's kind of a moment that's happening right now in sports. It's interesting, really. This happened with soccer. that in this moment there is this weird division between how people are treating sports on each side of the political divide. On one hand, there is this leftist obsession with sports. I don't know if people have noticed this, but I definitely noticed this in California. California did not used to be a sports state. It most definitively did not. And I know that Isaac Simpson has observed this as well. So I'm not trying to copy him. I'm just noticing the exact same thing as he did. But California, both northern and southern, did not used to be a sports state. We used to kind of hate sports. Now, I was a Giants fan when I was, a little kid. And then I grew to hate them because of Barry Bonds and the fact that he is the biggest asshat in the entire world. And then I became like a Mariners fan for a few years before I just stopped following baseball entirely. Sure. There's that. But sports was not what it was in other states. The Giants fans were not like the fans of the Atlanta Braves. We weren't like the fans of the Yankees. And the same thing for football. There's the 49ers. There are fanatical 49ers fans. They didn't really have anything to do with being in California. They just liked the franchise, I think. I think I met more 49ers fans in Washington State and in Oregon than I ever knew in California. I guess it's like Green Bay that way. Now, however, it feels like every political actor, every girl boss politician, every kind of like James Talrico, I'm like the new Gavin Newsom. They're all obsessed with sports. They can't shut up about how much they like sports. They never played sports in high school. They never liked sports before. They never were in professional sports. They don't strike me as the person that likes talking about the game. But now they're all into sports for some reason. And they're into like specific sporting, like they're all into like this last week, everyone was into the Knicks. Why are we into the Knicks in California? Why do we care about the Knicks game? No one ever cared about the Knicks game in California before, but it's just been decided. It's like a switch went off and everyone in Blue America really, 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 really cared about the Knicks. They really cared about the Knicks. And before that, it was something else. It was Colin Kaepernick. Well, Colin Kaepernick had like a social justice cause. But it's always some kind of fake, I'm one of the guys. I'm going to crack open a beer and watch the game, even though I know you don't really like sports. They don't even like competition. I'm supposed to believe that you really care about this sporting event because this is seen. It's like safe. People used to make jokes about safe horny. Safe horny is like, I like strong women. I like tomboys. Like being gay was safe horny. Any kind of horny that progressives approved of was safe horny. So that's like being attracted to girl bosses and mommy milkers was safe horny. Anything that millennial women thought was like the appropriate amount of horny to be. You could like girl bosses, obviously. You could be gay, obviously. You could have all sorts of kink preferences as long as they were consensual. You could have your pornography as long as the pornography was approved as being not misogynistic. You could even have BDSM pornography as long as the BDSM pornography had some kind of like stamp of approval on the part of like the feminists who created it. My BDSM pornography comes from a feminist art collective. That's what safe horny was back in 2023. Now, after 2023 is safe horny. In 2026, we have safe jockey. Safe jockey is being kind of chuddy in your personal tastes in terms of your liking, your appreciation of basketball and football and Americana and waving American flags, but it's coded in exactly the right way that shows that you're doing this in the way that hysterical progressive women approve of. You're going to the right games. You're waving the right flags. You're cheering in the right way. You're doing what everyone else is doing in the group chat. This is an acceptable way to appreciate sports until it's not, but we'll tell you when it is. And then you can switch around appropriately. I mean, really, what this is an attempt to piece together the leftist coalition. the leftist coalition has its vital half critically separated from its managerial half. Its vital half, in California at least, is heavily Hispanic. Now, Hispanics are not, as minority populations go, they're very unobjectionable. They're not particularly high crime except in a few areas and in a few gangs. They're not very politically vindictive, but they are aware that they're not white, and they coalition with an anti-white coalition. But one thing the Hispanics really like, they're very young. They're a younger population in the state of California, and they also really like sports. So what better way to convince your constituency that your one cause is the same cause than to ape their sports preferences? And this is what you have. And I always think of it kind of like Commodus with the gladiatorial competitions. He's hosting gladiatorial competitions for two reasons. First of all, because it's part of the formula. It's bred in circuses. And if ever there was a circus, it was professional sports. But in a different way, Commodus has this kind of vampiric obsession with gladiatorial competitions. He has this obsession with participating in them so that he can look like he is part of a Roman tradition. So, he's not really going to fight great wars like his father did, Marcus Aurelius, or at least no wars of any major significance. But he is going to pose as a warrior inside the gladiatorial competition itself, so that he can kind of recapture the vitality of a previous version of Rome that has long since passed away. So there's that dimension of sports. But at the same time, and I don't have a slide for this, I'll switch to this one. There is this weird kind of wholesomeness that's coming out of the World Cup. Very oddly, the progressives are all talking about things like basketball and baseball, which is typically the purview of Red America. It's not football season right now, otherwise they'd be talking about that. And there's sort of this weird right-wing smell that has oddly developed wafting from the World Cup, specifically around various European teams and European fandoms and Japanese teams and Japanese fandoms. They arrive at America and they can't see it as foreign. Something has switched in their brains. It used to be Europeans came from a cohesive society, and anytime you went out of this high-trust, cohesive, cultural, unified society, the first thing that would hit you when you got to America, I remember this. My family were always participants in the International House at the local college, and so frequently we had guests that came over from Europe. And a frequent complaint of these guests was always, America just feels so hollow. California just feels so hollow. Sure, this is a very nice university town. You're very friendly to us. Yosemite is beautiful. Mount Shasta is beautiful. San Francisco is beautiful, but something about it just feels hollow. There's no thick culture. There's no common understanding of how things are done. Everyone is an individual. Sure, individual people can have traditions. There's a tradition of how we eat dinner in this house, but it's totally different. Not totally different, but it's much more different in this house than it is in the next house. Like in this house, we're all German Americans, but in the next house, they're Jewish. And in the house over that, they're Argentinian or whatever. There's no common understanding of how things are done here. So everything kind of feels like single service. Every house is a single service tradition. Every monument feels like it was created 100 years ago because as old as it was in California. Everything kind of feels like a Potemkin village to the European. Everything kind of feels hollow and fake. And that's the first thing every European noticed when they came to America from whenever I was born to roughly about now. The first thing they felt, was this increased level of alienation and hollowness. And that's because America has always been more deracinated than Europe. We do have a culture, but we're ground zero for global deracination. And the cultural roots in America were never as deep as they were in Europe. They were at most in California, 200 years old. And unless you were like a descendant of the Missions or the Rancheros or whatever. And that must be like vanishingly small in California. In which case they might have been 300 years. There is no living Native American tradition in this state. And so certainly the first thing that Europeans noticed when they came over was, where is the culture? Where is the commonality? Where is the implicit sense of how things are? It's all gone. It feels hollow. But now the deracination has caught up to Europe, to Japan, to the British Isles. They're now aliens in their own cities. They feel the same deracination, the same separation of roots, the same feeling like they are ruled over by a bunch of vampiric elites. Now, I guess we didn't feel that way in the 90s when we were Americans, but there's no common assumption that everyone's breaking bread the same way in Paris any more than there is in San Francisco. Maybe a bad example. Or the town that I live in now, which is kind of like a middle-class California town, like very middle of the road valley town, literally. And suddenly, when Europeans and Japanese come to America in 2026, their first reaction is not, where did the culture go? Where did the solidity go? They already lost the solidity there. Now they can notice the things about America that are actually nice. They can notice the pieces of American culture that are not as thick as European culture used to be, but because that's no longer their standard, it becomes more noticeable. The natural beauty of America becomes more noticeable. The fact that Americans are friendly becomes more noticeable. And they begin to see that we're all kind of in the same boat. Since the World Cup started, there's been this overflowing emotion between Europeans and Americans after a lot of hard feelings during the Iran war. They know that we're in the same boat. We don't like getting dragged into these Zionist wars any more than you do. We don't like the fact that we've been deracinated any more than you do. We don't like the fact that you cannot tie the tradition to the land any more than you do. And now you know what it feels like. You know that when you're in a deracinated town in Germany or in France or in Britain, that it was not some decision to deracinate yourself. Deracination was a fact of life, and you had to do the best you could to preserve your traditions. And that's what Americans have to do. If they're fighting against this process, of managerial deracinations, they have to operate as individuals. And then, because the Japanese understand what it is like to be deracinated in their own countries, much less so in the case of Japan, but they're beginning to notice it, they come and see America with new eyes. We're in a more advanced state of deracination, but we've got vitality. We've got fight. And we do have our own culture that we're fighting to preserve in our own ways. We do have roots that we're trying to put down desperately against the constant attempt of the deep state and of forced diversification to uproot them. And of techno-capital, I can't leave that out, can I? We were always in the same boat. And weirdly enough, it took a soccer competition to show this to Europeans and Americans. I think this is something, I don't know. Look, it's a news cycle. For all I know, people, some of my friends from Europe and America will be out restarting the cycle of Europeans and Americans bashing each other in 2 weeks. They'll be calling us, Lizzo Americans, and we'll be calling them Eurocucks, and the most futile war on X as ever was conceived. But in this moment, there is an uncharacteristic moment of clarity. That was the thesis of my OGC speech. I asked, what is brotherhood? And it was about Marx and degeneration too. But the critical revelation of that speech, what is brotherhood? Beyond, the Aristotelian definitions of philia, beyond the C.S. Lewis stuff, beyond kind of the poetics. Brotherhood is a moment of clarity where you realize that your future is together. That is the message of brotherhood. That's the moment. And you see the beginnings of that, the beginnings of order. We need to throw better parties. We need to know how to wield elite culture. And for this reason, I maintain, and I will argue against Aaron, that if there is going to be a change in the government of the American empire, it will have to begin either in Europe or in blue American states or blue American areas. It has to start there. The energy will come from red America. They will supply the heart. They will probably supply the majority of the actual people in any kind of attempt to restore or correct things. But the beginning, the spark will happen in blue America. The head will follow. We have to throw better parties. We have to throw parties that actually communicate deep, sacred feeling. But at least we can assure ourselves in the moment that we throw better parties now. Right-wing parties have vitality to them. They have emotion. They have life. They have energy. Every single one of the events I've ever organized has had that energy. And I can tell you for a fact that has not been the case. Even when I was a leftist, back in, when was the last time I was a leftist? 2009, 2010, way long time ago. I have been a non-leftist for 16 years now, almost 15 years more like it. 2011 was when I left for good. When I went along and organized parties then, a lot of them just kind of, that was the energy. And I hate to say this, but it really is a case of the fact that almost all leftist cultural engagements have this kind of like feminine over masculine energy. The feminine led and the masculine followed. But in order to have a real good party, the masculine has to lead, and then the feminine has to receive the masculine energy and get really excited. It has to be seduced by the masculine energy. The masculine has to perform, and the feminine has to swoon. That's the formula for a good party. If the party is like, this party is going to be the women deciding what is pre-approved by power and what optimally validates ourselves. And then we're going to perform what we feel is validating. And then the men are going to come in and the men are going to clap because they feel like they have to and because they're attracted to us anyway. And then that's going to be the party. I mean, that's like most Democrat convention. Like females validating each other and men awkwardly like clapping like that. That is a lame party. And all parties have to have female energy. But the female energy has to be receiving. The female energy has to be, the masculine energy plans this party. The masculine energy decides the direction. The masculine energy shows the force of what it's worth, and the female energy responds. The female energy can even respond with its own performances, with its own set of displays of beauty, but it is always in response to the main masculine energy. And in that regards, the right wing has the advantage. The right wing has a flow of energy and a celebration that actually makes sense, that actually brings people forward into an organic connection. And if something like this can be imported into spaces that actually understand how elite culture works, how aristocratic culture, who have some memory of aristocratic culture, and who understand how aristocratic relationships can be forged in a space where people are actually able to exert cultural rulership, then things are going to start changing. It actually might take a long time to get to that place, but that is where the birthplace of a new ruling order will begin. It kind of takes me back to that whole question of Leo Strauss and Harry Jaffa and all this stuff. You know, we need to have pride in that which is wholesome. And that's what the right wing can model. And when elite culture models that, the world will change. Show me a vision of a wholesome future and people will fight and die for it. So show me a vision of a wholesome, good future for my children and we will fight and die for that. Show me a picture of a degenerate future where everyone's at each other's throats and we're all just trying to validate each other. And no one will. I think this is one of the key things, the key theme that I'm tracing in this talk. Things that belong together in the modern world are separated. Things that belong apart are forced together. So you might notice that I have a painting here. It is by Frederick I can't remember. Frederick Overreich, I think that was the guy's name. Frederick Oberreich, I think that is his name. And it is a picture of two women. It's called Italy and Germany. Italy and Germany. It was made in 1821. And in 1821, Italy and Germany both feel the same way. They are both countries that share a common language. They are both countries that used to be part of the same Holy Roman Empire. In Dante's time, the northern part of Italy was part of the German Holy Roman Empire. They both have a common vision. They used to be part of the old pagan Roman Empire before that, the Western Christian Empire before that. But in 1821, they both say that they're divided. They're kind of left by the wayside. They've become fundamentally made less than what they are. And I think in this painting, the artist is capturing the same emotion that was on display in 1821 between Italy and Germany that is going on, hopefully, between Europe and the United States, between Japan and the United States in 2026. They look at each other and realize we're more alike. For thousands of years, well, I guess in this case, for 1,000 years, Germany and Italy saw themselves as kind of oppositional. The Germans were always invading northern Italy, trying to reestablish an empire that no longer existed. But they're suffering under the same problem. They're suffering under the problem of a certain amount of deracination that's been foisted upon them. Now, I guess I shouldn't say that because I kind of consider the patchwork qualities of these medieval empires in some sense more healthy than the nationalist regimes that came after them. But the emotion is the same. The emotion is we are in a state where things that belong together are separated and things that belong or apart are forced together. We should not have to deal with mass migration in our countries. Diversity is unnatural. It's disruptive. It's life-draining. It's vampiric. The crime is almost less of a problem than the fact that their presence perverts the relationship that the state and the elite has with its own population. The elite should have a relationship with their population that has them believe that the population is the future of the elite and the elite is the future of the population. Instead, the elite's replacing them with scabs. Yet at the same time that it's forcing things that should be apart together, it's forcing things that are separated to be apart. Men and women should not be apart. They should be together. There is no political order worth fighting for where men and women are political enemies. There is no political order worth fighting for where men and women are political enemies. Now, we're forced to be in this situation for the sole reason that our institutions have been colonized by people who are inappropriately sitting in those positions, that have no reason to be in politics because they have no idea what politics is. But men and women should not be separate entities. Europe and America should not be separate entities. The cause of civilization itself should not be separated entities. This is something I've been thinking a lot about in relationship to the whole Strauss conversation. The whole Strauss and Henry Jaffa and all these people trying to create an international order. I sympathize with them. I don't sympathize with the lie. I don't sympathize with what the vision became. But I sympathize with what they envisioned, and they're feeling like they needed it. An internationalist order. Internationalist order could only be purchased by a lie. It may have to be purchased by a lie again, and lies will always die. But an internationalist order, even if we do decide not to pursue such a noble untruth, we need to at least dream of it. In the conflict between men and women, people say, well, look, there's a conflict between men and women because there has to be a conflict between men and women because men and women have different political interests. Yeah, and no shit. Men and women have politically different interests. Men and women are different biological organisms. By definition, if you are a different biological organism, you have different political interests. You can go from low to high. You can go from low to high. Your family has different political interests. Oh, I guess that means you should fight a political war against your brother, in which case the family will dissolve into chaos. Your country has an interiorly. It has different political interests. Wars between families, wars between states, wars between provinces. If you give in to those political interests, your country will dissolve. Human race has different political interests in terms of races that go to war against each other, in terms of nations that go to war against each other. Perhaps unavoidable. Perhaps there is no reigning political formula that can inculcate order against them. But I wonder, in the world of mass technology, in the world of nuclear weapons and superviruses, and maybe artificial intelligences that act like superviruses, can we afford total war? I think the answer is no, which means that there has to be some order that governs us, however minimally. To keep battles as ceremonial, to keep struggles as ceremonial. If the international order is in chaos, it will destroy itself. If the national order is in chaos, it will destroy itself. If the family is in chaos, it will destroy itself. If the human body, your human body, is a potentially political entity. We're comprised of little things called organs. Those are comprised of even smaller things that are called cells. And what happens when they develop their own political interests? It's they're fighting against each other. Well, that's called cancer. And that's what makes you die. This is obviously Hobbes's revelation. Hobbes's revelation. He was trying to develop politics from first principle without appeal to some kind of universal oughtness, just observing how it is. The justification for his morality of government is bang for your buck. You get more bang for your buck when you unify together, because without authority, life is nasty, brutish, and short. Therefore lies the justification for a Christian commonwealth of any size, from low to high. It is the defeat of chaos. I don't view things that way. Or I should say I don't view things that way exactly. Hobbesian chaos, being the art of authority over rebellion, is fine, but of course, everyone knows that if you do not have any rebellion, the human organism also dies. Humanity needs a certain level of chaos to survive. Here's the trick, though. Humanity cannot desire chaos, even if it needs it in reality. Hence, Hobbesian chaos and Hobbesian order mirror spiritual chaos and spiritual order. Humanity's great spiritual decision is between God and his own way, his own will, which is also known as chaos. The creation of the universe is God's order imposed upon the pre-existing waves of chaos, as translated from the Hebrew Bible. That is the spiritual concept of chaos. It is a microcosm of the Hobbesian chaos between authority and rebellion. And the commonality, the common thing that unifies these two concepts is in the human political desire. Humans as political entities must always have a component of chaos, but it is spiritually inappropriate for us to create that chaos. It is a sin to create chaos even though we need it to survive in a certain regard. We must always be reacting to organic chaos, and we must always be pushing towards authority, towards conciliation, towards cooperation. Even if we know that it is futile, even if we know that it will eventually result in some human conflict, it is inappropriate to become an agent of chaos for its own sake. And I think here is the distinction between friend and enemy we can also see in this. I will never forgive the left for shutting down discourse right when we needed it the most. We need to talk to the left now more than ever. Now what's going to happen is that the left is going to die. The left is going to die. Blue America is going to devour itself. And then somewhere in Blue America, there is going to be a spark. I don't know where that's going to come from. But I do know what to look for. I do know what to look for in Blue America. The people in Blue America who I'm looking for will be the people who are looking for order and not chaos. Now, there needs to be a distinction here. When I say order, I do not mean like, let's keep everyone quiet and placated while we destroy the human race. That is not order. Order is a common vision for the future where we both thrive together, where our biologies, where our teleologies, our vision of teleology carry forward and unify perfectly into the future. How can we make that happen? Not how can I scam you into complacency. Not how I can lull you to sleep while I steal your wallet. Not how I can placate your banal, criminal, animal desires while I destroy your posterity and destroy your future. I'm talking about the people who are actually thinking, what is it going to mean for me and my child to have a good, true, beautiful future, good, true, beautiful tomorrow? How can we make this work? You're Indian. What do you want your future to be like? You want to have a thriving community? Maybe not in North America. Maybe this is the inappropriate place for you. That has to be negotiated, obviously, with power. But certainly in India, you want a thriving society. You want an international order that will facilitate your future. You're a woman. You want a thriving future for your children, a thriving future for your sons. Do you want to have a future that's polygamous, where men are killing each other to be the top dog and get all of the women, and where women are totally abused and neglected from all kinds of validation from the people who are actually in their lives? Is that what you want for your sons or your daughters? Obviously not. Do you want a world where everyone is constantly being uprooted and no tradition can sustain itself and no meaning can possibly be pursued, and that God is pushed into the margins, and where any kind of idea of holiness is completely devoured by our need to incrementally make more consumption? Obviously you don't. That's not ordered. And if you have a vision for how human thriving can exist in the future, then let's work together to actually pursue it. Let us work together to pursue order through the chaos. That is my marker for friend and enemy. And eventually there'll be people who come from Europe, who come from America, who come from Japan, who come even from India. Men and women, red staters and blue staters. And we'll have to have a conversation about what the pursuit of that order involves. And in certain select places, probably either in Europe, probably either in Europe or in some blue American city, there will be a new vision about what this means and how vitality can find its way into the future. And people will be together once more. Well, guys, thank you very much. That is the end of the lecture section of this talk. I'm going to go into the super chats, and I am very disappointed that the super chat system is not working. How is this supposed to work? I can highlight some of them here. I can go from the bottom, but unfortunately, this social stream thing has not collected super chats for the future. It's kind of just tapped out. So I will have to again be reading these things from just my chat window. So I apologize for the delay or the fact that I can't display them. I can display one. How about I display the ones that I can, and we'll go from there. It'll be kind of weird, but whatever. I'll do them in two parts. I'll do the ones in a weird order, I guess. This incentivizes you to super chat me now, even though I hate using Google. I will also check the Ko-Fi links too. There's a Ko-Fi link. You can use that as well if you really want to. I need to actually open it though, and get into the thing. Nothing there yet, but let's just go through the super chats as they are. Okay. For the ones that actually have gotten captured by this new social stream thing that I'm using, we have Charlie Mackey for $25. Good evening. I hope you and yours are well. Can red and blue states still see each other as part of one nation? If they can, how much more stress can that take? If not, why not? Wish for one to subjugate the other. Can red staters and blue staters still see each other as part of one nation? Well, they can't really right now, and that's mainly the fault of Blue America. Blue America destroyed America. So if you're looking to cast blame or cast stones, look no further than Blue American states. They absolutely destroyed America. And for no reason than to marginally increase their political prospects and to give jobs to like these millennial women who just are using them for self-validation and vacations. It is very sad. Although, I mean, the leftist project to abolish the West began at least 100 years ago, if not 200 years ago. But in the current generation, like the boomer generation, it was very much Blue America that did this. How much stress can they take? Probably not much more. This is why no one cares about America 250, or at least no one in blue states. The problem is that red America cannot subjugate blue America. It just can't. It just can't. There's no red American formula for ruling blue America. If there was, then I feel like the culture war would be over already. The culture war would be over already if red America had the ability to rule American cities. And maybe it will. Maybe it will. Maybe some red state transplants will be the spark that it occurs in. But that spark will be in blue cities. It will be in blue cities. That's where the alternative elite will come from. And it will be of a different cultural timbre than what is going on in America 250 right now. This kind of plebeian culture of like UFC and monster trucks. I love it. But it is going to be, it can't be that. It has to be something more than that. So I'm going to move on here. Okay, can you describe what the difference is between the OGC and past orgs like the John Birch Society? What is being done differently now than from the past? Well, I mean, look, John Birch Society is an ally of ours. The John Birch Society was essentially strangled in its crib in the 60s because the neoconservative force basically ate its lunch. The neocons came in and with superior organizing power. They were able to organize in cities, get the funding, get the political victories, and by the time people like the John Birch Society knew it was up, they were already blackballed. And now that John Birch Society has come back, it is a thing yet again, but it is, I think it's about the size of the OGC at this stage. And it missed a historical opportunity. Now, what makes us different is our enemies are weaker. The deep state is weaker. The American media is weaker. We're less dependent on mass media for circulation. We can do things independently of them. So essentially, a giant apex predator has been removed from play, and it's a new media environment, and it's a new environment generally. And so now we can operate entirely differently. So that's the long and the short of your answer is I see it. It is because we don't have to deal with the American deep state in the same ways as we had before. Now, we have to still worry about direct regulation and direct force, but it's a lot different. We need our own oaths of Hirati in response to these continued and sustained injustices. Well, okay, great, but the oath of Hirati, if I remember this correctly, Like, this is an oath between people who are like blood brothers. And I don't exactly know, Generico, what sense you mean this in. But the oaths of Hirate, look, I appreciate that the Europeans sympathize with our struggle and we sympathize with theirs. And maybe we can exchange thoughts and well wishes over the divide. But it is not something that is easy. Certainly, it is not something that is how should I put this? It's not it's not easy, and it's not something that's really going to mean anything, because I cannot, as an American, solve Britain's problems. I just can't. And British people cannot solve American problems. To a certain degree, Americans can solve Canadian problems and Canadians can solve American problems. I think that once you're on the same continent in this day and age, possibilities open up. Just like if you are a Scots person, you obviously can solve English problems. If you're an Englishman, you can obviously solve Scots problems. They've been doing that for years. But I think that in between the continents, the divide is a little bit too much. So even though we are cousins, a political oath between us would be kind of meaningless, I think. And I think that I really want to shy away from meaningless oaths. I think that this kind of weakens the thing. So, it's something that I would approach skeptically. Okay, so Isaac Young, great author, says, been tremendously bored with the online. Put in my application with the OGC. We'll see what happens, but I was surprised my application sent up a signal flare. Okay, well, there you go. Well, welcome to the Brotherhood then. I think that we're going to be doing great things. And look, not all chapters are the same. They have different standards. Some emphasize, like some are totally open. Some emphasize a connection to Heritage America. Like, I don't have a connection to Heritage America. I'm not a Heritage American. But it's something that we need to, but that is, it really depends on the chapter. And so, not all chapters are the same in that regard. But I look forward to working with you in the future, whether you're part of the OGC or not, Isaac. And thank you, as always, for the support. So I apologize, but apparently the other chats aren't showing up. So I'll just have to manually go through them here and see what I can do. Okay, well, can I do this? That looks better. Okay, let's do this. Starting from the beginning. So I guess I should, before I go on, oof, that's bright. I should try to read the super chats that are part of the original aborted stream. So I guess let me pull those up really quickly. There might be only one of them, but I still need to read it. And I really apologize for having that stream collapse in on me, but it is what it is. I actually wonder if the air conditioning is on. I have one exception. I run the air conditioning when it is when I do my live streams. Other than that, I try to keep it off as much as possible. So from the previous stream, we have one. Thanks for the stream, Dave, by Bobby Bob for 20. Thanks for the stream, Dave. Have you ever read Bonfire of the Vanities, Tom Wolfe? Or Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey? The OG acid test hippies. These are very boomer books, so probably a bit obscure today. Well, I read Bonfire of the Vanities. I haven't read anything else by Tom Wolfe. A great book. I have not read Sometimes a Great Notion. I've heard about it. I have a good opinion about it. Somebody also asked me, and I don't see the super chat popping up right now, but there was also a super chat having to do with me asking me about Charlie Kaufman and Schenectady, New York. I have not seen Schenectady, New York, but I have kind of liked Charlie Kaufman's work in the past. Ever since being John Malkovich, I've liked him, but he kind of is a little too postmodernist for my take. His sincerity is oftentimes devoured in his own concept, and it doesn't feel like it's very much worth it. So I don't know. I admire Charlie Kaufman, but I don't really enjoy his work. It's way too cynical and nihilistic for me, and I always like to see some kind of edification as part of my art. I don't like just pure nihilism. I definitely don't like cute nihilism. So he's got two things going against him right off the bat. So thank you very much. Pete Budapest for $5 says neocons are big mad. Careful. These people hold grudges. Well, yeah, they can be mad and hold grudges against the Trump administration. Good luck. Who are they going to hold grudges against? All Gentiles everywhere for not being Zionist enough? Good luck, guys. I don't know what to tell you. It's not 10 years ago. Get with the program. We're not doing this anymore. We're not going along with this absolute madness. And neocons basically just need to be abolished as a political entity. They need to know that they're losing power. They need to be denied this power from the United States. And their institutions need to be essentially taken over, and their personnel need to be defenestrated, because I see no reason to tolerate these people anymore. They've been an absolute blight upon the political order of the left. They have very well destroyed Western civilization. And they've actually, ironically enough, destroyed the possibility of Zionism, because there's going to be zero sympathy for Zionism going forward from this moment forward. There is zero sympathy among the young people for the Zionist project, and they deserve it. They've had ample opportunity to make alliances and to make concessions and to be reasonable and to make some kind of common understanding of what it means to have a nation and identity in the modern world. And every single time they have refused those reasonable concessions, I have no sympathy for these people anymore. Moose Regiment for $20. Thanks for a great speech at the OGC conference. I held my pee for the whole thing. Well, given my speeches, you better. they're like an hour long. We chatted after. Well, you monologued about Aron versus Yarvin. Aron wants to reclaim the founding fathers, whereas Yarvin is dismissive. I'm sorry I sometimes monologue, but I don't always know how to deal with uncomfortable silences. I try to listen at these OGC events. I try to overcome my nature. And oftentimes, things people tell me are really great. I feel like I can't share it on streams. I can't be like, oh, this person told me this about their lives, because that would be a total violation of people's privacies. But people's stories about their individual lives are very, very, very valuable. Certainly when I can interrogate them. Anyway, yeah, so this is another thing. Aron wants to reclaim the symbols of the founding fathers. Yarvin wants to dismiss them. I can kind of say both these things. Look, when it comes to reclaiming Red America, and this is a difference between Red and Blue America, is that in Red America, we need to walk into the founding fathers as they were. In Red America, the founding fathers are a real active religion. People actually believe in the Constitution. They actually idolize George Washington and Hamilton and all that stuff. That is a real religious conviction. And because it's real and living, in Red America, you need to walk into it. You need to embrace it. In Blue America, this is not the same thing. In Blue America, the myth of the founding is a dead myth. Whenever a Blue American says he likes the Constitution, he's lying. Whenever he says, I really like George Washington, he's lying. These people are doing the James Talrico thing. These are hollow symbols that they're using to scam people with. I'm talking like the progressive HR person. These are things people are using to scam things with. They're not real. Got it. Yeah, I'll stop it. I saw, whenever you see that woman baby talking, you can never get over it. But these are, like, when you hear progressives wave the flag or talk about the founding fathers or talk about how much they're Catholic, these are not real convictions. These are performances. For instance, big major Catholic for Stephen Colbert. Man, I heard for 20 years how devout a Catholic Stephen Colbert was. Then he tells me that he doesn't even really believe in God or the afterlife or anything. And what he believes in is kind of like this vague Buddhist notion where God just is the universe. And the idea of a physical resurrection or Jesus Christ or judgment or hell or heaven, all of these things are just kind of like cultural affectations. For 20 years, I had to pretend like Stephen Colbert was Catholic as I was. He's not Catholic. He doesn't believe in Catholic social teachings. He doesn't follow those. He attends church. I guess, maybe. I don't even believe he does that, to be quite honest. And the same thing with James Talrico. He doesn't believe this stuff. And in case you think it's only about Christianity, it's the same thing with the Constitution and with the Founding Fathers. They don't really like George Washington. They don't really like the flag. They will tear down these people's statues the second you leave them in charge of a city. Case in point, Hamilton. For 7 years now, I've had to hear up and down and backwards that Hamilton was the good founding father. And the reason why I had to hear about Hamilton being the good founding father was the fact that there was a musical by a black guy called Hamilton, where they had diverse Americans play the founding fathers and rap battle each other about the Constitution. And this was every blue stater was soy jacking about this, and they swore up and down they loved Hamilton. And now just this week, they discovered, shock and horror, who could have thought about this? Who could have imagined this? Who could have imagined that? Did you know Hamilton was against democracy? Well, no fucking shit he was against democracy. I could have told you he was against democracy. All the founding fathers were against democracy. We've been screaming at this from the top of our lungs. But they don't care because they only like Hamilton because he was popular, because he was in a Broadway play. They only like Catholicism because Colbert needed to have some kind of cred as not a total bug man because he looks like a total bug man. He was a Catholic in the same way that James Talrico, or whatever his name is, pretends to be uber Christian. They don't actually believe it. These are false idols. And false idols need to burn. There's no more correct instinct. Now, in the case of the Holy Catholic Church and the cross and Jesus, I can't burn them because those are real living things. But I can burn anything else that is temporal. I can burn everything else that is part of this fake blue state. I like George Washington, but I'm a Democrat. Bullshit. And that needs to burn. And it's kind of funny that in this symbolic division, we see the real division between red state and blue state America. That's it at its most clear. All of these symbols need to be torn down in blue America because nobody believes them. And if they ever believe them, the false counterfeit thing needs to be removed before they actually believe in the real thing. That's just how human psychology works. I don't know a way of recolonizing blue America without temporarily stepping away from the symbols of 1776 and the founding. There's no pathway back for blue America that involves those things, which is why Yarvin is dismissive of them. Because he believes that, like I do, that the revivification of blue America the revivification of the West has to begin either in Europe or blue America. And in those places, these symbols are dead ideas. Now, maybe those can be rediscovered in a later era, but at the time being, they are false gods and they need to be treated as such. Jabba the Hutt for $5 says, it is our duty as husbands to try to elevate our wives' leisure time activities, or are they best left to their own devices? Kind of both. Women need time to just do whatever else they like, but it can't be politics. It just can't be, right? It can't be. You have to encourage. Look, women's politics has to kind of go through you if it's important. You should have no political. There should be a space for you to privately practice politics, and then there should be a space for us as a family to practice politics. There should not be a group chat where they go and become activists for the cause, led in battle by borderline personality disorder women who have a chip on their shoulder from their last divorce. That is not a healthy dynamic. Now, inside, I think it is very important for you to give a job to your wife and say, It's your job to make sure that this family's leisure time is as elevated as possible. We need more classical music and less, internet brain rot. We need more hikes and less kind of vegging out in front of, the TV on Saturdays or whatever. We need more of the good stuff, more of the high culture. And a lot of women, they'll make this their project. They'll absolutely walk into this role. And if they can take that on, that's fine. But, they also need some time to just kind of veg out themselves as women. I think that oftentimes it's funny. The same kind of condescending thing that feminists try to do for men is oftentimes a healthy thing to do for women. So it is absolutely condescending to go to women and go like, it's absolutely condescending to go to men, I should say. Sorry. It's absolutely condescending as a woman to go to a man. Like, you need quality time with your boyfriends. Let's have a man cave for you and your guy friends. This is your man cave. Like, not the regular house. That's mine. That this is your place where we can segregate it and you can have like your little space to like indulge your video game and football thing with your boys and sleeping bags. That is totally condescending. Also, like a point system for chores. Like if the husband does chores, then he gets this privilege. If the husband does this, then he gets that. That is totally inappropriate for women to do to men. But it can sometimes be very appropriate for men to do to women. Like if you give them their little female space so that they can have their like ice cream and girls' night out, like for not to clubs, but to appropriate, like indulgent but fun things. I think girls like that, and it's a very healthy thing for them to do. It's inappropriate for women to do that to men. But ideally, both women and men are trying to elevate the leisure time activities for both parties. Sam153 for $25 says, for your dose of wisdom. Cheers. Thank you very much. I wonder if my OBS is picking up these super chats anymore. Interesting how these things are populating and not populating. It's very strange. Anyway, let's go. Isaac Young for $10 says, StreamYard is awful. Streamlab is way better, even though there is a learning curve. It is an app, completely eliminated my lag issues. Yeah, Streamlab is good. I am really dedicated to OBS as a software, so I'd much rather just use Raystream with OBS. I don't know. I feel loyal to my softwares, and OBS has been with me for the longest time, so I think I'm probably going to use that. So, yeah, thanks for the suggestion. My wife used Streamlabs for a while, but we didn't want to pay the subscription fee, so I think we're doing this. How do you think, Seth McKinney for $10 says, how do you think the crisis of the 21st century will take place? Will nation states exist in the same way, or will power become localized? Will global supply chains fall and cause mass famine? Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know. I think that the development of technology is going to decide this. Right now, we are on course for a supply chain collapse, but it probably won't collapse entirely. It probably will be localized into regional powers. The reason why is because it's becoming impossible with current military technology to project power in any meaningful way. It's all gone down to like incredibly expensive area denial type things with like mines or drones and all this stuff. The hypersonic missiles have essentially made air forces much, much harder to deploy internationally because carrier groups are, I wouldn't say they're obsolete, but they're kind of obsolete in a total war scenario. So their threat is kind of diminished. And in the meantime, area denial is just the order of the day and the order of the foreseeable future. And because of that, it looks like we're returning to some kind of localist control. But again, our supply chains don't work under local conditions. So I think it'll be some negotiation between large global security arrangements and local control, which is very, very scary in the transition, but that is what the 21st century crisis will be. And in that, I think what might emerge might be some kind of human-dominated form of government that might have as a priority technological limitation, because I think at that point it will become very apparent that this is a priority. Okay, Traditionalian. I love the word. What happened to Last Things? Lambda and Settler's Lament on YouTube. I used to enjoy them. Okay, excellent question. Lambda was doing a series up until last year. I saw that he left, but I have not had a chance to check in on him, and I don't know what his deal is. Usually he did a Easter live stream, and I noticed he didn't do it this year. So I wish I could figure out what's going on with him. Settler's Lament left a few years ago, and I haven't heard from him either. Last Things is a different story. I am closer friends with him, and he had to leave for personal reasons having to do with someone coming after him in real life for his online content. But I happen to know that he is planning a return, but his return will be as a purely cultural creator. He's going to steer more into the books and movies and culture stuff and way away from the controversial issues having to do with race and gender and all that stuff. And I think that's good. He always did that cultural stuff better. And so I think that is a good role for him. So I think that Last Things is coming back. I think Lambda is coming back. Settler's Lament, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about Settler's Lament. But I hope he does come back because I used to like his stuff a lot. Isaac Young for $10 says, Grim stream, so I'll pitch a happier question. I recently returned from my extremely difficult work cycle. Any ideas to celebrate or unwind with? Like any ideas to celebrate / unwind? Well, I don't know about leisure activities. I've been really enjoying getting back into tennis. My wife and I have gotten a schedule so that we can go to the club now and actually play tennis, and I'm really enjoying tennis. Racket sports are just, for me, are optimal. Now, I always really hate pickleball. I'm sure pickleball is super fun, and I hear that Morgoth plays it, and it's probably a better plan for old age. But I am always just like, I learned tennis, and I think all other racket balls are just beneath me. Racket sports are beneath me, so I'm stuck playing tennis. Though I still haven't gotten my serve back. The forehand and backhand I've fully gotten back, but the serve just not so much anymore. And so I need to practice that. But you can't really practice when you have I have an hour of, club daycare time, and, I need to work up a sweat, but I also want to serve 100 balls. Doesn't work. Other than that, I don't know. I don't have time for video games anymore. It's just, I just don't have time. They're just not, every now and again I play a game of Blood Bowl, but that's just a simulation of a board game. And I have a invitation Oren McIntyre to play a Blood Bowl game. But anyway, that is good. Hopefully that helps. I don't know if I've really answered your question. But thank you very much for the super chat. Isaac Young for $10. Been tremendously bored with online. Put my application for the OGC. I already read that one. Okay. I think some of these are appearing on my thing. Okay. Let's see. This one's appearing. Okay, Charles Maki 26212 says, a dark alternative, but what of one eliminating or expelling the other? I don't want it, but I know it's a historic fact. Okay, so I'll read the first one. So the first one was, is it possible for one to subdue the other in terms of red states versus blue states? A dark alternative, what about one eliminating or expelling the other? It's a historic fact. So here's the thing, Charles Maki. In the event that mass immigration is turned off, Blue America will cease to exist in one generation. If mass immigration is turned off and the universities continue their collapse, by human physics, Blue America will cease to exist. So there is no reason for Red America to expel Blue America. And I don't think that Blue America has the cojones to expel or eliminate Red America. So I think that we're stuck with each other. I think there's a possibility that remigration will get underway in Europe. Possibly. That would be what Yarvin would call a regime complete problem. But there's not going to be an expulsion of one half of America. And there's probably not going to be much remigration on sort of the minority populations either. What's going to happen is either voluntary remigration on the part of perhaps very, very new Indians when the H-1B tap runs dry, and then kind of a normalization of race relations among the other people, and then obviously some population readjustments, since the non-white population actually has a much lower replacement rate birth rate than does Red America, and I think that will continue. Thanks for your dedication, Dave. This is the last super chat of the night. Thinking of converting to Catholicism because my Anglican church is geriatric. Feels like a church supporter. Feel like a church shopper. Well, okay, I do think you should convert to Catholicism. But it is always very hard because both Catholicism and Anglicanism are both undergoing leadership crises at this time. And so I can say that you should join Catholicism because our theology is correct, but do not join Catholicism because you think that we've solved politics or solved the geriatric problem. Most Catholic churches in 2026 are geriatric or they are immigrant churches, both of which are poor fits for young men who were born in this country, typically speaking. So typically you're stuck with commuter churches as a Catholic. And I think that is a very similar situation socially to most Anglicans. If you want like a good intermediary, which tends to be a weird solution, the Anglican ordinariate inside the Catholic Church has the theology of the Catholic Church, tends to be much, much more conservative, and tends to be much, much less geriatric than everyone else. So if you can find an Anglican ordinariate, it might be the perfect fit for you. But unfortunately, just like I can't say I offer investment advice, I can't offer theological advice. Obviously, I believe that the Catholic Church is theologically correct, and you should pick your church based on theology. And there's very little difference in terms of the theology between High Church Anglicans and Catholics. So for that reason, I think that you should look into the Anglican ordinariate, because I think that it is a correct move. But that being said, thank you everyone for the super chats. I don't think I've missed anything here. And I am burning up, so let's do a psalm. Let's do Psalm 3. I've been memorizing psalms. I've gone through 2 of them, 1 and 2. But I won't subject you to my bad elocution from memory, so we'll do Psalm 3 here. Psalm 3. Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? Many are saying of me, God will not deliver him. But you, Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, the one who lifts my head high. I call out to the Lord, and he answers me from his holy mountain. I lie down and sleep. I wake up again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear, though tens of thousands assail me on every side. Arise, Lord, deliver me, O God. Strike my enemies on the jaw, break the teeth of the wicked. For the Lord comes deliverance, from the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessings be on your people. So guys, thank you very much for joining me for Peddler's Green Podcast number 75. I apologize for the technical difficulties for the first half an hour. Hopefully this is a better microphone, sound-wise at least. And I promise to come back next time with the super chat system better sorted out so that everyone's super chat can go up on the screen.